Chapter 10:30. While the Cheese Emperor was testing his children, the ceremonial officials had already prepared everything. On the platform on the right, the Cheese Prime Minister Jiang Rumo stood up and said, "Please inform the Emperor that the time has come." The few people waiting in the square started to adjust their breathing. The Cheese Emperor looked down at them and said to Jiang Rumo, "Prime Minister, don't be anxious. There's still one person who hasn't arrived." He tilted his head and asked, "Where is he?" Han Ling bowed and said softly, "The official should have arrived at the academy by now." The Cheese Emperor wasn't angry because of this. He had made the decision at the last minute in the Imperial Ancestral Temple, so he couldn't summon anyone now. The announcement of the decree needed time, so he couldn't rush over. Even Han Ling couldn't go personally. If there wasn't an official edict, Jixia Academy wouldn't even bother with him. They would even beat him up. The Emperor turned around and said to the Prime Minister, "Wait a little longer." At this point, everyone knew who the Emperor was waiting for, other than Zhong Xianzun, who had stolen the glory of his peers. Who else was worthy of the Son of Heaven saying the word wait? This was a great honor. The current Emperor of Great Qi, regardless of grace or punishment, had always given as much as he could. This was the true image of a mighty ruler. Jiang Rumo's appearance was that of a slightly stout old man. His eyes were kind, and he looked a bit like an old lady. As the current Prime Minister of the Qi, he naturally knew the significance of the Yellow River meeting. He also understood the Emperor's thoughts to a certain extent. He said softly, "Yes, Your Majesty." The people on both sides couldn't help but whisper to each other. Some were excited, some were worried, and so on. The few people standing in the square all had different reactions. Ji Zhaonan didn't care. He wasn't afraid of anyone below 30 years old. Those in the outer building didn't care either. After all, whether Yung Ginzuan came out or not wouldn't affect their spots. Only Xie Baoshu gave Jiang Wang a mocking look. Unfortunately, Jiang Wang was still meditating and didn't notice him. Among the three competitors in the inner building stage, Jiang Wang had already prepared himself. Jiang Wang had already prepared for the worst. From the very beginning, he had regarded Zhong Xianzun as his opponent. Now that he was just a little late, there was nothing to be surprised about. Cui Ju was still standing there, his cold face expressionless. It was hard to tell what he was thinking. On the other hand, Lei Zhanqian's face was uncontrollably ugly. He had already seen the inner building stage spot in the bag. He didn't expect this to happen so late. Since he was standing at the front, didn't that mean that the Political Affairs Hall approved of him the most? Why was he announcing Yung Ginzuan coming out now? What was the point? He really wanted to ask his honorable uncle, "Are you playing a monkey?" However, he was still rational and could only try his best to maintain the calm on the surface. At this moment, Jiang Wang's wait, there is no harms. In a battle between geniuses, there was only a fine line between the strong and the weak. Who would win and who would lose would only be known after the battle. With more choices, everyone will be convinced. That was right. Hearing his cousin's voice, Lei Zhanqian calmed down. So what if he was Yung Ginzuan? Who was stronger and who was weaker? They would only know after they fought. He might not have been a match for Zhang Xian in the past, but that might not be the case now. Emperor Qi glanced at his son. Of course, she knew that he was trying to appease her. However, not only did he not blame her, he even cooperated with her with a smile. Mighty Qi is full of talented people. It's inevitable that I am dazzled by the selection. Wu Qi, you and your brothers and sisters have to help Imperial Father keep an eye on him. Jiang Wuqi, Jiang Wuxia, Jiang Wuyo, and Jiang Wuhua answered in unison. Ekena obeys. Empress He still had a motherly smile on her face, but her phoenix eyes involuntarily flickered. The Emperor's love for Jiang Wuqi was simply shocking. Among the western city gates of Linzi, the first gate from the south to the north was the southern head gate, also known as the Ji Gate. Outside the Jixia Academy was the famous Jixia Academy. The so-called Dragon Gate of Qi Ground was naturally famous. However, there were very few people who could actually enter and see what it looked like. For lecturers, they had to at least start from the outer tower. For students who studied, they had to have made contributions to the country to be able to enter this academy. This was not a place that looked at talent, nor was one's family background important. It only looked at contributions. Sheng used his contributions in the Battle of Qiyang to win himself the opportunity to study. However, he was filial and benevolent, so he gave this opportunity to his cousin who was desperately trying to break through to the next realm. All right, Sheng was the one who sent this message. The messenger came with the imperial decree and stood outside the academy. He naturally did not have the right to enter. The people in the academy verified the imperial decree, so an instructor went to deliver the message. In a quiet and secluded place, a cool breeze blew through the bamboo forest, and a clear stream flowed on the white stones. A few steps forward on the left bank, there was a small pavilion. The pavilion was surrounded by benches, and a man in white was sitting on the eastern bench. His back was leaning against a pillar, and his right hand was casually resting on the railing. His two long legs bent and straightened, forming a perfect curve like a bow, while his straight legs moved forward like a spear. He held a book in his left hand, and his head was half tilted, his long black hair flowing freely. Reading with the cool breeze and the sound of flowing water, there was an indescribable elegance. The elderly instructor came from downstream. Yunginzuan, the emperor has an imperial decree. The white-robed man shifted his gaze away from the scroll and looked at the newcomer. Dissatisfaction for being disturbed could be seen in his ink-black eyes. However, this dissatisfaction did not make people feel offended. It only made people feel that this was his true temperament. The elderly instructor sighed, obviously not very willing to pass on this message, but he could not go against the imperial decree. You are required to participate in the Yellow River Conference. You're allowed to come out early. Once the imperial decree was passed, there was no room for discussion. Sheng exhaled softly, and the white breath was like a rainbow passing through the mountains and forests. He casually placed the book on the wooden table in the pavilion. Then he turned around and sat down in a relatively upright posture. This showed that he was serious. Do you know, sir? He pressed his hands on his knees, and the loose white clothes could not completely cover his muscles and bones. The deep lines of his muscles were faintly discernible. He looked at the elderly instructor and said in a very calm tone, "The one who sent me here was my cousin. He used his achievements on the battlefield to trap me for a year. If I need the Emperor's special decree, I can only leave this place early. To me, this is a humiliation. To others, a special decree before the Yellow River Conference might be a great honor. But it was different for him. Therefore, he turned his hands, palms facing the sky. Two hands with distinct joints, two palms like jade, faced the sky. Suddenly, 5 rays of light flew out from his body. The 5 rays of light passed through the pavilion, broke through the boundary of the academy, and went straight to the sky. And in the distant sky, the stars suddenly shone brightly. Chapter 1031. In front of the Imperial Ancestral Temple. Almost everyone who had reached a certain level of cultivation looked towards the southwest of Linzi City. 5 rays of light shot up into the sky, entangling with each other as they collided with the distant stars. In this clear day, in the southwest corner of the sky, a star suddenly lit up. It was so bright at this moment, almost competing with the sun. Everyone knew that it was not a star. It was a star tower erected by a cultivator who had broken through to the next realm. It was the first time it had shown its brilliance in the present world. This star flashed and disappeared. The sky was still only illuminated by the sun. The scene of the 5 rays of light in the sky was also like an illusion. But who could forget this scene? Since ancient times, there were countless cultivators who had broken through to the inner mansion and stepped into the outer mansion. How many people could create such a phenomenon? The entire Linzi city was boiling. The people waiting in front of the Imperial Ancestral Temple were even more excited. This is the 5 mansions' glory. Peerless beauty is indeed the heavenly abode. Chongxian is really the heavenly abode. He actually reached the outer mansion with the heavenly abode. The civil and military officials, the noble ministers, and the high and mighty people could not help but whisper to each other and discuss. Good. In the area where the nobles were gathered, a loud shout suddenly sounded. Cheng Xianmingguang suddenly stepped forward and clenched his fist in front of him. Like father, like son. My son has done well. He was used to socializing. Today, it was impossible for him not to come out to make friends. Therefore, even if he was not interested in the martial arts competition, he still dressed up and came out. Not far away, Cheng Gengsheng was not frightened by the scene of the Five Mansions' glory, because he had already expected it. Instead, he was almost stunned by his uncle's shout. He could not help but roll his eyes. 14, who was standing beside him, silently moved closer, as if to say, "Don't be afraid." No matter how powerful the Zhenggenjia family was, there were many people who were not inferior to them in today's occasion. Moreover, Zheng Xuanmingguang was famous for idling around. He was a wanderer from young to old. No one really took him seriously. But at this time, no one stood out to reprimand him. It was really, his son was too strong. Even the Qi's prime minister, Jiang Rumo, glanced at Cheng Xuanmingguang without batting an eyelid and couldn't help but sigh inwardly. It was said that the eldest son of the Marquis of Chengxian was a mere figurehead, with a golden exterior and a rotten interior. However, Jiang Rumo felt that this Cheng Xianmingguang was really born with good fortune. He was born in the Zhenggenjia, a top-notch family. He was born with good looks and lived a life of luxury. He lived a carefree and unrestrained life. When he was young, he naturally had the Zhenggenjia to shelter him from the wind and rain. When he was a little older and needed to take responsibility, his younger brother, Cheng Xinming too, was born. There was no ugly matter of brothers fighting each other, because there was no possibility of fighting. Cheng Xianmingguang continued to be carefree. When Zheng Xuanmingguang lost his power, Zheng Xuanmingguang would have to face some pressure in life. His cousin, Zheng Xuanchuyang, had won the title of Vicious Butcher in another battle. Until now, the Zhenggenjia had 2 marquises. His son, Yung Genzuan, really lived up to the name of Tianjiao. His 5 prefectures were glorious, and the star building was like the stars. He suppressed his peers to the point that they lost their colors. Counting carefully, in the 60 years of Cheng Xianmingguang's life, had he ever suffered a little? He played from young to old. He did not worry about the past, nor did he worry about the future. This was much more comfortable than being a prime minister. Compared to the discussions on the viewing platform, everyone had their own thoughts. On the square, Bao Buizhao and Xie Bao Shu could not simply sigh. Their faces changed. Even the female general, Qiyu, was moved. There was no other reason. The Qi emperor had summoned Yung Genzuan because he wanted to become the #1 expert in the intermansion stage. But now that Yung Genzuan had completed the breakthrough, the place he wanted to fight for was in the outer mansion stage. In other words, at this moment, this peerless Tianjiao, who had stolen the glory of his peers, had become their competitor. Originally, they were sitting on the mountain and watching the tigers fight. Now they were walking with the tigers. In Jixia Academy, the young master who was reading just now said, "This is my humiliation." Thus, he put down his book. Thus, the 5 prefectures were glorious, and the star building was instantly erected, causing a sensation in Linzi. He did not indulge in this extremely resplendent scene. His hands clenched, and the stars in the sky dimmed. He didn't care what the old instructor was thinking. He just stood up and took his book. "Teacher, I'll go now." He strode out of the pavilion, his white robe fluttering as he stepped into the air. This person's magnificence. It was only when this white-robed young master's figure disappeared into the air that this senior teacher of Jixia Academy suddenly regained his senses. Only then did he realize that his shoes had actually stepped into the water. Outside Jixia Academy, the imperial messenger waited for a long time. Finally, Yung Genzuan, who was holding a book, appeared behind the ancient stone archway. The imperial messenger hurriedly cleared his throat, raised his voice, and was about to announce the imperial edict. A raised hand stopped him. "Please forgive Yung Genzuan for not being able to accept the imperial edict." That noble young master in snow-white robes smiled slightly. This smile made the light in his eyes become much gentler. because I've already fulfilled my promise and left Jixia Academy. The imperial messenger was stunned. Only then did he recall that there was indeed such an imperial edict last year, which ordered young Gunzuin to study in Jixia Academy for a year before breaking through and leaving. Today's imperial edict was to order young Gunzuin to leave seclusion early. However, young Gunzuin had already broken through and left seclusion himself. How could this imperial edict be announced? The imperial messenger fell into an unprecedented confusion. Young Gunzuin had already strode away. However, for this Yellow River meeting, I will fulfill your majesty's wish. In front of the imperial ancestral temple, above the Pill Emperor, the Emperor of Deqi was sitting in silence. Jiang Wuqi, who was sitting on the right, looked at the sky in the northwest corner of Linzi City. There was a hint of eagerness in his eyes, but in the end, he suppressed it and smiled. Empress, he said happily, "Congratulations, your majesty. Deqi's Tianjiao has produced many geniuses. It's all thanks to your virtuous governance." The Emperor of Deqi raised his hand and chuckled. Since ancient times, Tianjiao has its own destiny. If virtuous governance, I am satisfied that the world can enjoy and the people can live in peace. This is also thanks to the Empress. The Empress said humbly, "It's my duty to pacify the harem. I can't compare to your majesty's efforts." Jiang Wuhua, Jiang Wuyo, and Jiang Wuxia, no matter what they were thinking, all had smiles on their faces. Of course, Jiang Wuyo was the happiest among them. Because young Gunzuin had entered the outer tower, Jiang Wang no longer had any obstacles in front of him. The Emperor of Deqi looked at her bright and sunny face. "Wuyo, I forgot to ask. You said that you were looking at the Tianjiao of Deqi. Who do you think is worthy of your attention?" Jiang Wuyo didn't hesitate and said directly, "Ji Zhaonan is Tianjiao. As for the rest, Aken thinks that Jiang Qingyang is the best. In other words, Bao Buizhao, Xie Baoshu, Chao Yu, Cui Ju, and Lei Zhanqian were all inferior to Jiang Wang. As for Ji Zhaonan, he was the disciple of the war god and was almost a generation older than Jiang Wang. When Jiang Wuyo compared the two, she actually thought more highly of Jiang Wang. The people present naturally knew about the Tianya stage and that Jiang Wuyo had bet heavily on Jiang Wang. From the looks of it, she had successfully created a reputation for Jiang Wang. Oh, the Emperor of Deqi seemed to be interested and asked again, if Young Ginzuin hadn't broken through, do you think Jiang Qingyang would still be the best? If he couldn't even get first place in the inner mansion and needed someone else to give it to him, then he naturally wouldn't be the best. Jiang Wuyo smiled valiantly. Aken thinks that even if Chongxian is in front of him, Jiang Qingyang won't pale in comparison. Ahem, ahem. Jiang Wuqi couldn't help but cough twice. He had always admired Jiang Wang, as if he were looking at any outstanding talent in the country. However, he didn't think that Jiang Wang could be a match for Young Ginzuin. He had seen the battle between Jiang Wang and his cousin Lei Zhanqian with his own eyes and knew very well that Lei Zhanqian had the upper hand in terms of strength. Although Jiang Wang was now famous overseas, he didn't think that Lei Zhanqian had no chance of winning. As for Lei Zhanqian, there was no way he could challenge Young Gunzuin. Crown Prince Jiang Wuhua chuckled as he listened to his father and sister talk. He seemed to enjoy this kind of warmth very much. Jiang Wuxia, on the other hand, smiled and drank a cup of wine. There was a trace of bitterness in his smile that he couldn't swallow. Speaking of which, among all the princes and princesses of Deqi, he was the first to express goodwill to Jiang Wang. He had even promised him a position as a clan relative as soon as he left the 7-star secret realm. It couldn't be said that he wasn't sincere. Before Jiang Qingyang went out to sea, he had also been the first one to find him. It wasn't that he didn't believe in Jiang Wang's potential. On the contrary, he believed in him very much. In the game of life and death on the floating continent, Jiang Wang had flown over and slashed Lei Zhanqian with a sword full of billions of starlight. That moment had already amazed him. He had only been waiting for the best offer. He wanted to use his irreplaceable resources to get a better offer. He hadn't expected his third sister, Jiang Wuyo, to be so decisive and straightforward. She had only met Jiang Wang once, but she hadn't hesitated to make a big bet. He had never known that the Empress of Huaying Palace was such a gambling addict. At their level, they naturally had a lot of resources at their disposal. However, there were even more people to feed and more resources to operate their forces. No matter how many resources they had, they simply didn't have enough to go around. They had to be very careful about who they bet on and who they cooperated with. This was because in the grand game of qi, the few of them who were qualified to compete for the throne had been stuck in a stalemate all this time. It was hard to say who would win in one fell swoop. They had all been holding their own while accumulating every inch of advantage. Before Jiang Wang had gone to Huaying Palace, he hadn't been in a hurry. He assumed that the other party would know how generous his offer was after weighing the pros and cons. But who would have thought, by the time Jiang Wang rose to fame on the Tianya stage, Jiang Wuyo would be the judge of the duel, wielding the square heaven ghost halberd. While waiting for news in Linzi, he suddenly realized Jiang Wang himself was an irreplaceable resource. His Yangxin Palace wasn't. At least Huaying Palace, Changsheng Palace, and Chang'an Palace were all eyeing him covetously. Even if he searched the entire state of Qi, he couldn't find another prodigy who was more suitable to bet on than Jiang Wang. Yung Genzuan was, of course, the best Tianjiao, but he was also a legitimate son of a prestigious family. Could he bet on him? Would he accept his bet? Even for Jiang Wang, who didn't have any foundation in Qi, if it weren't for the sea fishing tower incident, would he submit to any prince or princess of Tianjiao? He only needed to be loyal to Qi and Emperor Qi and cultivate step by step. There was no need to take the risk of competing for the throne. There were too many smart people in this world. Anyone with potential had countless hands pushing carts full of Dao origin stones, waiting for an opportunity to bet. Didn't you see that when the Political Affairs Hall drew up the list of names for the Yellow River Gathering? Jiang Wuxia drank and didn't say anything. Not to mention how the ladies felt. Emperor Qi was also a little confused by Jiang Wuyo's answer. With the tolerance of a father to his daughter, he asked with a smile, "I'm afraid it's difficult for the heaven-battling palace of the three palaces to do it, right?" Empress he also smiled and said, "Although I believe in Wuyo's foresight, but in this case, it's almost impossible." "Yes, it's impossible." Jiang Wuyo sat up straight and looked very heroic. How could a 19-year-old boy change the will of a perfected cultivator and save a condemned prisoner at the sea fishing tower? How could a mere inner palace cultivator kill more than 100 sea race commanders in 9 days? How could a lonely boy from a small place win a life and death battle with Tianjiao, one of the biggest sects in the world? How could a perfected cultivator be unable to save him? These are all impossible. Jiang Wuyo put his hand on the table and looked around. A hero is someone who can make the impossible possible. Everyone was silent. Yes. If so many impossible things had been done by the young man, standing on the square with his hand on his sword, it would have been impossible. Was it really impossible for the three palaces to challenge Tianjiao? "Sister," Jiang Wuqi said softly, "I believe that even Jiang Qingyang himself doesn't always expect miracles. So, Wuqi, you don't understand Jiang Qingyang at all. That's why you think that Lei Zhanqian is still a match for him." Jiang Wuyo smiled. Jiang Qingyang doesn't expect miracles. He only creates facts. He only fulfilled his words one by one. When he said that he would go to the battle of the Yellow River, I believed that he could do it. In fact, when she first saw the battle between Jiang Wang and Lei Zhanqian in that shabby martial arts arena, she also felt that Lei Zhanqian and Jiang Wang had a great chance of winning, but lost because of insufficient preparation. But after witnessing Jiang Wang's journey to the coastal waters with her own eyes, there was no possibility of comparing the two in her heart. Lei Zhanqian's so-called arrogance of monopolizing the universe was only the arrogance of his family background and talent. And Jiang Qingyang's neither servile nor overbearing steps forward was the true, unyielding pride that came from his heart. Seeing Jiang Wuyo so serious, Jiang Wuqi paused for a moment, then said, "It seems that he's really an amazing person to be able to gain sister's attention. I'll wait and see." The Qi's empress glanced at Jiang Wang from afar and saw the young man in her eyes. Suddenly, she smiled at the emperor. Our Wuyo rarely admires a person so much. This empress thinks that Jiang Qingyang is indeed a talented person who stands out from the crowd. Your Majesty, haven't you always been worried about Wuyo's marriage? Why don't you take this person as the prince consort? In this empress's opinion, only such a heroic man will not bring shame to our Wuyo. The Qi emperor didn't immediately express his opinion after hearing this. However, Jiang Wuyo immediately stood up and said to He Huangli, Ken is very grateful for Imperial Mother's concern for Ken. It's just that Imperial Mother doesn't understand Ken. Ken doesn't want to be a wife and raise children. It's also not a hero's nature to enjoy flowers and grass. Jiang Wang naturally has the appearance of a hero, but Ken also has the ambition to be a hero. This is not something ordinary people can do. Empress He's gentle blade could kill a strong enemy with a smile. It seemed that every sentence was for Jiang Wuyo's good. If it were any other princess, Jiang Wang, who had an excellent reputation in Tianjiao, would be a good match. But who was Jiang Wuyo? She was the Huaying Palace Master, someone who was qualified to compete for the position of heir. It just so happened that her husband couldn't be the most dazzling. Otherwise, if she ascended the throne one day, who would be in charge of the Qi? Was this Jiang that Jiang? With so many choices, how could the Qi's royal family take this risk? Therefore, she cared about Jiang Wuyo's marriage and found a good match for Jiang Wuyo precisely because she wanted to easily push Jiang Wuyo out of the competition for the position of heir. That was why Jiang Wuyo stood up angrily and immediately refuted. Her attitude could be said to be fierce. Not only did she refute the idea of the emperor's son-in-law, but she also stabbed the crown prince. Of all the people present, only Crown Prince Jiang Wuhua liked to take care of flowers and plants. This was not a hero's nature. How could he shoulder the Qi's empire? The empress made a move against her, so she hit the snake where it hurt. She turned around and looked for Jiang Wuhua, Jiang Wuqi, and Jiang Wuxia, one looking at their shoes and the other at their wine cups. Didn't seem to notice the sudden confrontation at the Pill Emperor's banquet, which had been as warm and affectionate as a family banquet. They would sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight, not join in the fun. P.S. 1. This chapter has 2 updates combined into one, so it's the normal update for today. Then I'll add more at night. 2. A true hero is a person who makes the impossible possible. This sentence came from an article I wrote on Jihu. Interested readers can search for it and take a look. The question is, the northern expedition is very difficult. What supported Zhuge Liang and Jiang Wei's northern expedition? My article should be in the front row. You can find it by browsing, or you can search on my personal account. Above. Chapter 1032. Jiang Wuyo would never be rude when greeting others. But when it came to fundamental issues, she would never give in. Empress He took a deep look at Jiang Wuyo and said with a smile, Your son has grown up and is no longer under your command. Since you don't want to, no one can force you to go. Let's forget about this. Jiang Wuxia's smile was devilishly handsome. Jiang Wuqi clenched his fist in front of his lips and suppressed his cough. Jiang Wuhua, who was suddenly dragged in, only said in a gentle voice, This chair is uncomfortable to sit on. Come, exchange with the third princess. He took the initiative to resolve the tense atmosphere between the empress and Jiang Wuyo. He said that Jiang Wuyo's rude behavior of standing up angrily was because the chair was uncomfortable. It was a way to give both sides a way out. There's no need. Jiang Wuyo smiled brightly and sat down. No matter how uncomfortable the chair is, one will get used to it after sitting for a while. She didn't give Jiang Wuhua any face, and there was a hidden meaning in her words. However, Jiang Wuhua still smiled warmly and said, As you wish, imperial sister. He turned his head and said, There's no need to exchange. The eunuch standing at the side bowed and accepted the order. This was considerate, but from another perspective, it was also a kind of declaration. No matter what, the eunuchs present were the emperor's family. Besides the emperor and the empress, only the crown prince could directly give them orders. If the other princes and princesses wanted them to do something, although they could also command them, they had to say please in terms of etiquette. It was not until this time that the Emperor of the Qi spoke. He said to Han Ling, who was next to him, "You can continue." If the master ceremony could continue, then the confrontation between these people could also stop. The Emperor didn't say anything, but he had already said something. The Empress had a smile on her face, and her bearing was graceful. All the princes and princesses quieted down and looked at the square. Han Ling gently raised his hand. Then everyone saw a noble young master in white, holding a book in one hand, walk to the square as if he was on an excursion. It was as if the sky was shining down and the clouds were everywhere. The few people who were waiting in the square also had their own charms, so they were not overshadowed. However, at this very moment, everyone could only place their gazes on this man who was given the title of Lindsay Elegance. He stood near the imperial ancestral temple. Between him and the Emperor of the Qi were the princes and princesses, the Dan Emperor, and most of the square, as well as the 7 Tianjiao who were waiting to be selected. He cupped his hands and bowed. "When the country goes to war, I will bear the responsibility. Yung Gunzuin is here to ask your majesty for a place." When he unfurls his flag at the river viewing platform, let him see the majestic power of the Qi. He did not regard the competition in front of him as a competition at all, and he was confident that he would be able to display his flag on the river viewing platform. The Emperor of the Qi sat high above the dragon throne. His gaze was emotionless as he said indifferently, "Minister Chongxian, who would you like to take?" The 7 pairs of eyes in the square, including Jiang Wang, turned to look at him. On the high platforms on both sides, the officials and nobles with transcendent being powers on the right could still see him clearly. Many of the ordinary people on the high platform on the left stood on their tiptoes to look at him. Many people squeezed to the edge of the high platform just to get a closer look. At first glance, it seemed that everyone was facing him. The man in white had already straightened up and stood upright. His long hair was casually draped behind his head, but it did not look messy. There was only a sense of freedom. He had long been used to the attention. He first glanced at Ji Zhaonan. As someone who was in the outer tower, he naturally only had 2 choices: the outer tower or the unlimited number of people under the age of 30. Ji Zhaonan's face was expressionless. Silver armor and white clothes looked at each other. Yung Gunzuin looked away. He said to the Emperor, "Yung Gunzuin has just entered the outer tower. Naturally, he would like to take a place in the outer tower." He asked for a place in the outer tower, but he did not even look at the 3 competitors for a place in the outer tower. To be able to make it this far in the selection of the entire Lindsay area, who would not have some pride? Xie Baoshu was already beyond angry, but he did not speak first. Bao Boizhao sneered. "If you were in the inner mansion realm, it would not matter if you wanted a place. But you have just entered the outer tower, and you want a place in the outer tower? I cannot agree." The Bao family and the Zhenggenjia were political enemies. He, Bao Boizhao, was not afraid of the Zhenggenjia's power at all. The Emperor of the Qi did not speak, as if he did not intend to interfere. Xie Baoshu took 2 steps forward, turned sideways, raised his eyebrows, and said arrogantly, "I was just coaxing you. That's why I called you Chongxian Fenghua. How old are you this year? Do you know the immensity of heaven and earth?" Chao Yu, who was born in the military, was much colder, but it was impossible for her to be completely indifferent. She only took the straight knife from her waist and said coldly, "You want a place in the outer tower, sure. Come and ask for my knife." They were all proud sons of the time, so they had their own imposing manner. Yung Gunzuin still did not look at them, and said to the Emperor of the Qi again, "Your Majesty, can Yung Gunzuin compete?" The Emperor of the Qi said slowly, "Rivers and seas will never dry up. Fairness is nothing more than the strong going up and the weak going down. I can give you a place in the outer tower. But if you want a place in the outer tower, you have to convince everyone." This showed his attitude. He wanted Yung Gunzuin to join the competition for a place in the outer tower and compete with the 3 existing outer tower cultivators. Naturally, no one could object to the Emperor's authority. It was nothing more than a competition between 3 people to a competition between 4 people. Yung Genzuin cupped his hands again. Yung Genzuin accepts the order. He straightened up, flipped his left hand, and held a scroll behind his back, then said, "Then come." He used his bright black eyes to sweep across Bao Buizhao, Xia Bao Shu, and Chao Yu. He added, "I mean, all of you together." There was always a smile at the corner of his mouth, which made him seem like he was not very serious. But the great master's ceremony, in front of the emperor, empress, and civil and military officials, he could not be joking. So he was serious. There was no need to compete in pairs 4-2 and then 1. He only needed to fight. He wanted to fight 1 against 3 and truly convince all the participants and bystanders. So arrogant. The high platforms on both sides were very quiet. When the emperor nodded to allow Yung Genzuin to compete for a place in the outer tower, the final competition had already begun. No one was willing to break the solemn atmosphere of the great master's ceremony at this time. Arrogant. Xiaobao Shu was so angry that he laughed. He had been angered by the fat Zhengenjia earlier, and his mood had not been good. Now that he met someone who was not fat, he did not expect to be angered even more. Does the Tianjiao that was praised by third-rate fortune-tellers really think that he is the best in the capital? There were not many people who dared to say that Yu Beidu was a third-rate fortune-teller. Coincidentally, the imperial advisor, Xia Huaiyan, had never liked fortune-tellers and had once called Yu Beidu a person who pretended to be mysterious. He, Xia Bao Shu, was also a proud son of the heavens. What was going on with him and 2 other Tianjiao to besiege a person who had just entered the outer tower? Would anyone admit defeat if they won? At this time, Bao Buizhao and Chao Yu were silent because of this. Okay, but at this time the Emperor of the Qi spoke. Bao Buizhao, Chao Yu, Xia Bao Shu, the 3 of you will go up together. If Yung Genzuin wins, this place will be Yung Genzuin's. There is nothing to say. If Yung Genzuin loses, I will punish him for being arrogant and disrespectful and disrupting the ceremony. Chapter 1033. On the left side of the stands, Chong Xianmingwang was so anxious that he almost jumped up. He wanted to lift his son up and give him 2 slaps. Even if he didn't want to, he had to scold him. Breaking through to the Tianfu realm was already overwhelming his peers. Couldn't he just fight them 1 by 1? Why did he have to be so arrogant and fight 1 against 3? Wasn't he just looking for trouble? Couldn't he learn from his father and act modestly and humbly? This disappointing, unfilial son. But His Majesty the Emperor had already spoken. No matter how naive Chong Xianmingwang was, he knew very well that no matter what he did, he couldn't change anything. He could only heave a deep, deep sigh. On the square, since the Emperor of the Qi had spoken, Bao Buizhao and the others no longer hesitated. The 3 of them stood in 3 different directions and looked at Yung Genzuin. Jiang Wang and the other 2 inner house cultivators and Ji Zhaonan stood at the edge of the square, leaving enough space for them to fight. The rules of the Imperial Martial Competition were the same as the rules of the Yellow River Gathering. Apart from personal weapons, they weren't allowed to wear armor or use any magic tools, including things like talismans. This was to prevent countries from arming their cultivators with powerful magic tools and turning Tianjiao's decisive battle into a clash of national resources. This was to give a certain degree of fairness to those small countries with insufficient resources. In other words, when they arrived at the Riverview platform, Ji Zhaonan had to take off his matchless armor and could only use his Shaohua spear to fight. For the cultivators in the competition, the influence of their family background was minimized as much as possible, and the focus was on their own strength. This was undoubtedly a relatively fair rule. There was only 1 outer house cultivator participating in the Yellow River Gathering, and this wasn't something that could be modestly declined. Yung Genzuin was so arrogant, so Bao Buizhao, who was born in the Bao family, didn't need to hold back. In fact, it was already a shame for him to have to fight 3 against 1. The Emperor of Qi agreed to this battle, which undoubtedly meant that in the eyes of the Emperor of the Qi, this battle could be established. Yung Genzuin wasn't completely without a chance. How could he accept it? Even the Son of Heaven was not always able to see through everything. No matter how wise and powerful he was, There were times when he would be deceived by treacherous people. He, Bao Boizhao, was going to dispel the clouds and see the sun, returning the world to the light of the universe. Therefore, he was the first to move. A strong gust of wind blew, and his long robe fluttered. He pressed his fingers together and pulled down from between his eyebrows. A vertical pupil directly separated the space between his eyebrows and appeared in the eyes of the world. Bao Boizhao was the first to attack, and his first attack was a divine ability. This ability was called Heaven's Eye. Heaven's eyes were opened twice. One of his eyes was as clear as day, while the other was for heavenly punishment. That closed vertical pupil suddenly opened. A dazzling golden divine light shot out and instantly pierced through Yung Genzuan. It was an illusion. The white-clothed young man's phantom was destroyed, and the golden divine light continued to move forward until it hit the solemn high wall. It was blocked by a translucent light shield. The entire translucent light shield rippled violently, like a boulder hitting water. It took a while before it calmed down. This was the Imperial Ancestral Temple. Bao Boizhao's light of heavenly punishment could actually cause such violent ripples in the protective array of the Qi Ancestral Temple. One could imagine its power. It was definitely not something that could be blocked by the physical body. Bao Boizhao was furious, but he still maintained sufficient respect for the battle itself. He knew how terrifying the Heaven's Abode cultivators were. But Yung Genzuan had just broken through to the outer sect today, and it was difficult for him to stabilize his state. This was where the opportunity lay. Therefore, he was not willing to use probing methods to give Yung Genzuan the chance to slowly adapt in the battle. Instead, he used his trump card right away. He used heavenly punishment at first glance, and directly raised the battle to the most intense level. It would be best if he could catch the arrogant Yung Genzuan off guard. He directly used his most lethal mystique killing technique to kill him on the spot. Therefore, his light of heavenly punishment arrived almost at the beginning of the battle. However, Yung Genzuan was too fast. In that instant, his body was almost weightless, and he moved far away, creating an effect similar to spatial teleportation. Only an afterimage was left behind on the spot, and it was pierced through by the light of heavenly punishment. The white figure dodged the light of heavenly punishment and took a step forward. Suddenly, the treasure tree of the Xie family laughed maniacally. Ha 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 ha! There was a beautiful light that surrounded his body, illuminating him with extraordinary brilliance. That was his scholarly aura, talent, and treasure light. In the distant sky, 4-star towers appeared, and the stars in the day echoed with Xie Bao Shu. There is the sound of a fanatic singing, or saying, "I am Chu Kuangren." The phoenix song laughs at Confucius. Or saying, "The emperor calls me, but I don't get on board. I call myself a wine immortal." Or saying, "My jade belt covers the river. My crown covers the 9 heavens." Those were arrogant and unbridled voices. Those fanatics, laughing at the predecessors, or proud of the emperor, or using the river as a belt and the sky as a crown. They were wild and arrogant. Divine power, wild song. Under the influence of this divine power, all the offensive techniques of the user would be greatly enhanced, and the power of the techniques would be greatly enhanced. The more developed the divine power, the greater the degree of enhancement. Xie Bao Shu raised his hand. Happily, the brush shakes the 5 mountains. Between heaven and earth, a scholarly aura rose into the sky. A brush as large as a pillar that supported the sky, as if it was held by a deity, fell to the mortal world. And this godly brush swept away the wind and clouds and fell arrogantly. From the top of Yung Genzuan, it fiercely wiped away his debts. The deity was beyond the heavens, and the earth was the rice paper. Yung Genzuan, a mere ink stain on the paper. It should be mixed into the calligraphy and painting and returned to heaven and earth. This technique was called Divine Brush, and its power was greatly affected by the user, and it was difficult to determine its grade. However, it had always had a very fatal weakness. although it was powerful, it was slow to condense. Therefore, this technique was commonly used in group battles, and teammates had to help create opportunities. However, today in Xie Baoshu's hands, this divine brush was formed almost instantly, and its power was extraordinary. This was the power of a supreme-grade Dao technique, the power that only yellow-grade Dao techniques had. And he had actually done it with a raise of his hand. Previously, outside the Imperial Ancestral Temple, Cheng Gongsheng could accurately grasp Xie Baoshu's mentality, and he did not dare to make a big deal out of it. The word scram made Xie Baoshu look like a clown. However, how could Xie Baoshu be weak, since he was publicly listed as an outsider of the Yellow River meeting and the Imperial Court's Minister Xie Huai, and did not avoid suspicion? But seeing, on the huge square in front of the Imperial Ancestral Temple, the raging power of the Tao primordial energy almost swept across the entire square. The posture of the brush also seemed like it wanted to split the square into two, and it wanted to wipe Yung Gunzuin out of existence. I have the divine brush, and I will be famous in the world from now on. On the two high platforms on the left and right, a Dao technique light shield rose to prevent possible damage. On the other hand, the seats of the Qi's Emperor and Empress did not have any light. However, any Dao technique that surged up to this point dissipated silently. On the square, Yung Gunzuin's white robe fluttered, and his figure shot forward rapidly, as if he was playing a game of chase with the divine brush. However, as he flew at an extremely fast speed, he flipped his right hand, and his slender and fair fingers spread open. He aimed at Xie Baoshu from afar and pressed down. Boom! Xie Baoshu's other spell, which had already formed in his hand, suddenly collapsed, and he was pressed halfway into the ground. The extremely sturdy stone slab, which was engraved with runes and supported by the power of the array, was directly crushed. With Xie Baoshu's waist as the center, countless cracks spread out like a spider web, leaving behind shocking scars on the square. It was enough to show how powerful this attack was. It was the divine ability Chongxian, the famous bloodline divine ability of the Chongxian clan. The Chongxian clan used this divine ability as the foundation to develop the Chongxian secret technique, which also became the foundation of the Chongxian clan. It was the foundation of the Zhonggenjia clan's existence. Jiang Wang had experienced Cheng Gongsheng's Chongxian secret technique many times and was always amazed by it. However, compared to the Chongxian divine ability that Yung Gunzuin was displaying now, the difference between the two was like heaven and earth. Even someone as strong as Xie Baoshu was pressed to the ground by this attack. However, this battle was not a one-on-one battle. Roar! Just as Yung Gunzuin displayed his prowess and pressed Xie Baoshu down with his palm, General Chaoyu, who was born in the Winter Solitude Army, moved. She was definitely not a beautiful woman, but the glory of a warrior had nothing to do with beauty or ugliness. The light of heavenly punishment missed and caused ripples in the Imperial Ancestral Temple's spirit design. A huge stroke of genius swept across the plaza, leaving a deep trench wherever it passed. Yung Gunzuin, whose white robes fluttered, flew swiftly in the air. He pressed down from afar and pressed Xie Baoshu to the ground outside of this dazzling light. She, who was so low-key that she did not feel like she was participating, leaped into the sky with a single step. At this moment, she was high up in the sky, and she was facing Yung Gunzuin from afar. Behind her, an endless amount of blood stench gathered crazily. A ghost general clad in black heavy armor, holding a ghost head saber, stood high up in the sky. He had red eyes, a green face, and white fangs. His entire body was surrounded by blood stench, and he was about 2 zhong tall. Divine ability, Ghost General. This was a ghost killer general. He was able to grow through killing on the battlefield. After being nurtured by Chaoyu until now, he already had the battle prowess of an outer tower divine ability expert. In other words, Yung Gunzuin was facing 4 outer tower divine ability experts. Since Yung Gunzuin had said such arrogant words, and the battle had already been established, This was a fair fight. No one on the battlefield would give their opponent a chance to breathe, not to mention that the ones participating in the battle were all Tianjiao. They had never fought together before, but naturally, they would complement each other seamlessly. The ferocious and terrifying ghost General Gao and the silent and cold, skinny female general formed a stark contrast. Such an unforgettable scene was left behind in the sky. Qiao Yu's straight saber was hidden behind his back, and he stepped in the air. Every step he took produced an explosive sound, and after each step his body became faster. With such a terrifying speed that kept stacking up, he rushed towards Yung Gunzuan. The ghost general raised his ghost head saber high up, and when he was still far away, he slashed down with his saber. The huge saber aura carried the termination energy, and as if it could topple mountains and overturn seas, it slashed down towards Yung Gunzuan. How was this a slash? It was clearly a slash of a mountain. At this moment, the stroke of genius that Xie Baoshu had first released was still chasing after Yung Gunzuan. Behind him was a mountain-like giant brush. In front of him was a female general hiding her saber and the huge saber aura from the ghost General Gao. Before this moment, Yung Gunzuan had only just dodged Bao Boizhao's light of heavenly punishment and slapped Xie Baoshu. That was not all. Xie Baoshu's hair was disheveled, and he could not bear the humiliation of being pressed into the ground. He pressed his hands on the ground, crushing the stone slabs, and stood up. He opened his arms wide, as if hugging the wilderness, and was about to use his strongest killing technique without holding back. Bao Boizhao, whose light of heavenly punishment had missed, was also approaching at a terrifying speed. On the huge square in front of the Imperial Ancestral Temple, all the attacks and encirclements that took place at this moment deeply attracted the attention of the spectators. The cultivators standing at the edge of the square, other than Ji Zhaonan, who was standing still, the other three inner palace cultivators were more or less on high alert in order to deal with the aftermath of the battle that might come later, including Jiang Wang, and all of these shocking and frightening lights and shadows. Yung Gunzuan's pitch-black eyes only glanced at them indifferently. The smile on his lips made him seem less lonely and cold. While he was flying, he suddenly stretched out his right hand again and pointed his index and middle fingers together towards the sky. Rumble. In the sky, a sun appeared. It was another blazing sun that was different from the blazing sun in the sky. Other than the sun, there was another sun. This blazing sun hung high in the sky, pressing down on the tall and ferocious ghost General Gao, blocking the huge saber aura that had slashed out. The saber aura that was mixed with determination energy slashed down on this blazing sun, but like a clay ox entering the sea, it disappeared without a sound. This divine ability was called Sun Wheel. It suppressed all evil and swept away all impurities. All evil retreated, all gods and ghosts burned. At this moment, the sun will firmly blocked the ghost General Gao. Immediately after, Yung Gunzuan's remaining fingers opened up one by one, and from the state of fingers together, he opened his right hand wide. He opened up his 5 fingers and moved towards Xie Baoshu. Therefore, everyone knew he had chosen the breakthrough point. Xie Baoshu laughed wildly. "What harm can you do to me?" Before he finished speaking, there was already a bronze mirror that was illusory and real, standing above his head. Clear light shone in all directions, and a mirror hung high in the sky. It was the divine ability, the bright mirror. The bright mirror was not stained by dust, and naturally reflected karma. Its effect was that it could reflect all influences that were applied to the body. It was also because of the existence of the bright mirror divine ability that he was able to suppress the influence of the mad song divine ability. Although he was arrogant, he was actually able to guard his heart, and thus he was able to control the mad song divine ability better. But then, something that shocked almost everyone happened. Yung Gunzuan suddenly appeared in front of Xie Baoshu. In the eyes of everyone who suddenly widened, the handsome young master in white suddenly grabbed towards the sky with his right hand. The The sun wheel that was in a stalemate with the ghost general suddenly disappeared and appeared in his hand. At first glance, it looked as if Yung Genzuin had grabbed the sun and then smashed it down on Xie Baoshu's head. Smack! The bright mirror shattered. Bang! The blazing and dazzling sun wheel directly smashed onto Xie Baoshu's head, shattering all the beautiful light on his body and extinguishing the mad song around him. Once again, he was smashed into the ground. It was unknown whether he was alive or dead. At this moment, the huge brush that was chasing Yung Genzuin finally dissipated silently. The stroke of genius could not write him off in the end. Many of the spectating cultivators could not understand the scene just now. The step that Yung Genzuin took in front of Xie Baoshu was too sudden, and Xie Baoshu, who was on the field, could not react in time. Jiang Wang had a deep understanding of Chongshuan's secret technique, but through the feeling of the suction force just now, he understood what had happened. When Yung Genzuin pressed down on Xie Baoshu, he had indeed used Chongshuan's divine ability, but it was not as Xie Baoshu had thought that he was being attacked. Instead, he was using a strong suction force to pull him to his side. At first glance, this was undoubtedly an unwise choice. Because Qiao Yu's hidden blade had arrived, the giant brush technique was also close, and Bao Boizhao was close to him. Pulling Xie Baoshu to his side was like inviting a wolf into the house, increasing the danger for himself. Even if he used Xie Baoshu as a meat shield, he could not withstand so much damage. It was even more impossible to count on Qiao Yu or Bao Boizhao to hold back. However, Xie Baoshu had coincidentally activated the bright mirror divine ability. The rebound effect of the bright mirror divine ability caused Yung Genzuin to be pulled to Xie Baoshu's side. That was why he had reached out to grab the sun wheel and smashed it down. In other words, Yung Genzuin knew Xie Baoshu's divine ability and Xie Baoshu's choice like the back of his hand. Thinking deeper, perhaps Zhong Xianzun's 1-against-3 wasn't the arrogant arrogance that many people imagine him to be. Instead, it was very likely that he really did understand his own strength and the strength of his opponents. Before entering Jixia Academy last year, he had already understood Xie Baoshu. That's right. If Yung Genzuin only had talent for cultivation, given Chongxian Fat's intelligence, the battle for the head of the Chongxian family should have been settled long ago. Putting aside the fear in Jiang Wang's heart, the battle in the square was still ongoing. After Yung Genzuin's sun wheel smashed Xie Baoshu to the ground, only Qiao Yu, her ghost general, and Bao Boizhao were left on the square. The scene of him smashing Xie Baoshu to the ground was shocking, but Qiao Yu and Bao Boizhao did not hesitate at all. Without the sun wheel blocking it, the tall ghost general roared, and blood mist exploded around its body. Before the blood mist dissipated, its huge shadow had already pressed down on Yung Genzuin, and the ghost head saber sliced through space. Ghost generals were not evil creatures. In other words, they were born with divine abilities and were nurtured by the baleful energy, so they did not have the weaknesses of evil creatures. If it had such an obvious weakness, Qiao Yu would not have been pushed onto the list of candidates for the Yellow River Gathering. Therefore, although the Sun Wheel divine ability had the ability to sweep away evil creatures, it was only a collision of strength that did not cause any substantial damage. Now that it had regained its freedom, the saber smashed down like a mountain. Clang! There was a deafening sound. Yung Genzuin raised the sun wheel with one hand and used the blazing sun as a shield to block the ghost head saber. The sun wheel divine ability was similar to the Dao technique Blazing Sun that Zhuo Guanglia used to become famous at the Yellow River Gathering when he was 15, but it was fundamentally different. The Dao technique Blazing Sun used the high temperature of the sun to incinerate everything. The sun wheel divine ability reflected the light of the sun, forcing evil creatures to retreat. Of course, in terms of value. Even if the Dao technique Blazing Sun had reached the threshold of transcendent grade, it still could not be compared to divine abilities. At this moment, Yung Genzuin was using the sun wheel as a weapon, and this was a usage that no one had ever seen before. Generally speaking, this divine ability was used to suppress evil creatures and was often used in conjunction with spells to expel evil creatures. However, the world was full of mysteries, and thousands of people had thousands of ways of thinking. The same divine ability in the hands of different people might have a completely different appearance. At this moment, the Sunwheel was firmly blocking the ghost-head saber. In comparison, Yung Ginzuan, who raised the Sunwheel, looked so small, and Jiang Gui, who cut down the ghost-head saber, looked so huge. In terms of physical strength, Yung Ginzuan was obviously far from Jiang Gui, but under the effect of Chengshuan's divine ability, he lifted up and flipped Jiang Gui over. Bao Buozhao's voice sounded at this moment. Be careful. Although he just left the school, he knows us very well. The eye of heaven had two eyes, and the other eye could see through everything. Naturally, Bao Buozhao could clearly see how Yung Ganzuan defeated Xie Baoshu. Following the warning, the shadow of a whip whistled through the air. The long whip seemed to have come from the hands of a deity. Wherever the grayish-white whip passed, it left behind layers upon layers of illusions, which were endless, undulating mountain ranges. Bao Buozhao's mountain-moving whip. As for Bob's second divine ability, it just so happened to be the mountain-moving divine ability. Cheng Gung Sheng, who was watching from the stands, couldn't help but twitch his mouth. He finally understood why Pockmark Bao didn't come to watch the ceremony today, leaving him with no place to express his sarcasm. The mountain-moving whip was Uncle Shua's personal weapon. Now that it was in Bao Buozhao's hands, it meant that the competition for the future head of the Bao family had already been settled. The Battle of the Yellow River helped Bao Buozhao completely secure his advantage. On the surface, it seemed reasonable. Although Bao Buozhao was older than Bao Zhongqing, Bao Buozhao could enter the list of Outer Realm, while Bao Zhongqing couldn't enter the list of Inner Realm. It was clear who was stronger and who was weaker. As the mountain-moving whip fell, it brought with it howling mountain shadows. The power of the mountain range that Bao Buozhao added on top of it was something that Yung Gunzuan's divine ability couldn't easily dispel. Therefore, he retreated. His white robe fluttered like a falling leaf, helplessly floating in the howling wind. Somehow, he floated to the top of the tall ghost general's head and landed lightly. The ghost warrior regained control of himself after being overturned, but a foot fell on top of his head. Bam! The moment he landed, Yung Gunzuan already had the strength of 1,000 caddies. He directly stomped Jiang Gui into the ground, following in Xie Baoshu's footsteps. Jiang Gui had a strong body, although he was buried deep into the ground, creating a huge hole in the square. He seemed to be unharmed. He turned his hand and slashed his blade towards his own head, as if he was going to die together. Yung Gunzuan floated up. Buzz! The ghost head blade hovered above Jiang Gui's head, letting out a buzzing sound. Just from this control of the blade, Jiang Gui didn't lose to any Outer Realm cultivator with divine ability. After he forced Yung Gunzuan to retreat with his blade, he immediately rose from the ground, bringing with him dirt and rocks. From below, he chased after Yung Gunzuan. Yung Gunzuan stretched out his hand and pressed down. The huge repulsive force pushed his body up again. Crack! Bao Buozhao, who was observing the situation with his heaven's eye, was already prepared. He accurately lashed out at Jiang Gui's face. Yung Gunzuan stretched out his hand and pressed down again. This time, he directly pulled Bao Buozhao a few inches closer. His body crashed into the inner circle of the mountain-moving whip, instantly closing in on Bao Buozhao. Bao Buozhao's eyes widened. A dazzling golden divine light shot out. Yung Gunzuan, on the other hand, was already falling straight down. He grabbed the sun chakram with one hand and smashed it down again, hitting Jiang Gui's ghost head blade. It let out a deafening sound. Clang. Wonderful. Too wonderful. Yung Gunzuan was high up in the sky. Relying on his superb use of Chengshuan's divine ability, he moved left and right, leading and repulsing, up and down, facing the pressure of the mountain-moving whip, dancing on the blade. It was truly amazing. This battle was definitely the highest level of Qi's younger generation, the highest level that the outer tower could display. At this moment, Yung Ginzuan found another opportunity to fight Jiang Gue head-on. It was obvious that he wanted to use the same trick again, like how he defeated Xie Baoshu to defeat another opponent. And at this moment, there was a line that was drawn from top to bottom. This line seemed to have always existed between heaven and earth, as if it was the most precise line in the middle, as if it had always divided heaven and earth into two sides. Chao Yu, whose long hair was tied into a braid, seemed to have jumped out of thin air and suddenly stood face to face with Yung Ginzuan. The straight blade that was hidden behind her back seemed to have never shown its sharpness. But that line had already appeared, hiding the blade for 10 years, waiting for the chance to kill. Chao Yu was able to enter Qi's list to participate in the Yellow River Gathering, not because of her ghost head divine ability, but because of her ferocious blade technique. This blade was too fast, too ruthless, too stunning. There seemed to be a voice, but there seemed to be no voice. Right in front of Yung Ginzuan, right in front of his bright and beautiful nose bridge, there was a gem-like object that emitted a beautiful light that shattered. It dissipated just like that, causing the spectators to involuntarily feel a sense of regret. The withering of beautiful things in the world was always sad, and at the same time that it shattered, the straight line that Chao Yu slashed down also disappeared. The two halves were equal. This should be Yung Ginzuan's third divine ability that he had never shown in front of others. So far, Yung Ginzuan had only used Chongxian and Solar Chakram, and these were the two divine abilities that he had shown in front of others. But now everyone knew that he had reached the outer tower with the cultivation of Heaven's Sanctum, and he had 5 divine abilities. At this moment, Yung Ginzuan, whose robes were whiter than snow, and Chao Yu, whose long hair was tied up, faced each other. Chao Yu's blade was still hidden behind her back, as if it had never been slashed out. There was a moment of astonishment in her eyes. Clearly, she did not expect that her 10-year hidden blade could be blocked. But her body reacted before her mind, and she quickly retreated. Yung Ginzuan's eyes were also filled with surprise. He also did not expect that this unremarkable female general in the army would be able to block his life-saving divine ability with one slash. But his reaction was even faster. He clenched his 5 fingers, and a powerful suction force instantly pulled Chao Yu back. And then he grabbed the Solar Chakram, and without hesitation smashed it on Chao Yu's head. Blood splattered, and Chao Yu's entire body was flung outwards. The strong physique brought about by the starlight body tempering and the protective secret technique that she had activated before the Solar Chakram had prevented her from being smashed to death on the spot, but she had temporarily lost the possibility of self-control. The gray shadow of the mountain moving whip whistled at this moment, right in front of Chao Yu's flying body. Bao Buizhao had arrived. He immediately chose to save Chao Yu. As long as she could protect Chao Yu, her stunning saber strike will be able to pressure Zhong Xianzun. Without a doubt, this was the best choice in this battle. But Yung Ginzuan had already turned around, and under the effect of Chongshuan's divine ability, he once again clashed with the Ghost General. Bao Buizhao saved Chao Yu, and Yung Ginzuan attacked the Ghost General. These two events happened at the same time, and this was a choice made by both sides. Clearly, Bao Buizhao had made the wrong choice. The price was boom. That tall and ferocious Ghost General was directly smashed by the Solar Chakram several times. Yung Ginzuan was like a blacksmith, using the Solar Chakram as a hammer. He smashed half of the Ghost General's body. The armor instantly turned into blood energy, and the tall body dissipated like smoke. The Ghost General was not afraid of the Solar Chakram's ability to suppress evil, but after its body was smashed and its termination energy scattered, it was still destroyed by the scorching Solar Chakram. If Chao Yu wanted to cultivate to her current level, who knows how much effort she had to put in and how much killing she had to go through. Amidst the dissipating blood energy, Yung Ginzuan, who was holding the Solar Chakram, raised his head and looked back at Bao Buizhao, who was holding the whip in the air, as well as Chao Yu, who had just stopped behind Bao Buizhao. The smile at the corner of his mouth was still there, and his gaze was still calm. He let go of his hand, and the solar chakram howled into the air, emitting endless light as it faced the two of them. Qiao Yu did not bother to wipe away the blood on her face. Qiao Yu also did not care about the intense pain that came from her body. She only hid the straight blade behind her back once more. She could still swing her blade, which meant that the battle was not over yet. And in front of Qiao Yu, Bao Buozhao decisively whipped the solar chakram that was getting bigger and bigger and sent it flying. Under the observation of the Heaven's Eye, that bright light was really too much of an eyesore. No, Bao Buozhao suddenly felt a sense of danger and understood that his attention was attracted by the light of the solar chakram, and he had revealed a weakness. Next, he would have to face Yung Gunzuin's crazy attacks. He made a prompt decision, directly closing his eyes and activating his third ability, Lightless. This ability was like its name, destroying all light and completely messing up one's position. All of a sudden, the darkness that covered the entire square descended. This was a total lightlessness, a darkness that lost all directions. In this darkness, only Bao Buozhao's vertical eye could see everything. But Yung Gunzuin was lost in his field of vision. Above his head, Bao Buozhao suddenly raised his head, and as expected, he saw that white-clothed figure descending from the sky. The observation ability of the heavens, I became more and more clear under the lightless ability. He could finally understand why Yung Gunzuin was able to come and go so freely under the cover of the lightless ability. It was his Chongxian ability. Around Zhong Xianzun's body, repulsive and gravitational forces were constantly moving. In a single breath of time, they would move back and forth several hundred times. The feedback from the profound multiplication divine art helped Zhong Xianzun lock onto his position. Just as Bao Buozhao saw this point, a huge gravitational force came from above, trying to pull him closer. The light of the ability flashed, and the power of mountains was on his body. Bao Buozhao had just used the power of the mountain-moving ability to resist the terrifying gravitational force, stabilizing his body in the air, when suddenly his body became light again. That terrifying gravitational force suddenly disappeared, and he was brought down to the ground by his own huge power of mountains. He quickly pulled away from Yung Gunzuin, and at the same time, he also pulled away from Qiao Yu. At this moment, a figure wearing clothes whiter than snow had already streaked across the sky, and once again came face to face with Qiao Yu. Yung Gunzuin's target was still Qiao Yu. In this lightless darkness, Yung Gunzuin relied on the infinite feedback from the repulsive and gravitational forces to quickly lock onto his opponent's position. And Qiao Yu hid his saber behind his back, standing still in the air. When Yung Gunzuin descended from the sky, a straight line was drawn. It almost tore apart the lightless darkness for a moment. Qiao Yu could also capture his opponent in this lightless environment. Perhaps this was the key to victory? From Bao Buozhao's perspective, this saber attack of Qiao Yu's was not as good as the previous one, but it was understandable. After all, that saber attack was originally a perfect saber attack with the essence, energy, and spirit in one place. It was not easy to execute, and Qiao Yu is currently injured, but even though this saber attack was not as perfect as the previous one, it still possessed an extremely fierce killing power. Bao Buozhao still had hope, but this hope was quickly extinguished. In front of Yung Gunzuin, a gem-like object once again disappeared. Good things in the world were not firm, and the colored glass was easily broken. The disappearance of good things was depressing. But for an opponent in a battle, what was frightening was that this powerful life-saving ability was actually used more than once. Bao Buozhao, who was watching this scene, was already so shocked. It was easy to imagine how Qiao Yu, who was facing Yung Gunzuin directly, was feeling. And in fact, when facing this saber attack of Qiao Yu's that was not as good as the previous one, Yung Gunzuin did not need to use his life-saving ability again. The reason why he used it, of course, was to finish off his opponent in the shortest time possible. For many people, this was already a breathtaking battle. But for him, the battle had dragged on for too long. When that straight line was destroyed, Yung Genzuin had already reached out and grabbed the sun wheel. Under the influence of the lightless ability, the sun wheel had also lost its brilliance. It was now a black, wheel-shaped object. It had lost its infinite light and had also lost its ability to suppress evil. It was almost perfectly restrained by the lightless ability, but did not affect its weight and firmness. Bang! The sun wheel once again smashed onto Qiao Yu's head, directly smashing her to the ground. This time, she did not have any extra strength to resist. Her helpless body smashed the stone slabs on the ground, causing cracks to appear. Yung Genzuin had held back. Otherwise, she would have died. There was no need to kill in this kind of martial arts competition. Moreover, with so many experts watching, it was impossible for them to watch Tianjiao be killed. Although she did not die, the pride of an expert did not allow Qiao Yu to participate in the battle anymore. So now, only Bao Buozhao was left. Yung Genzuin turned around. Although he could not see clearly, he was still facing Bao Buozhao. Under the cover of the lightless ability, many people on the high platforms on both sides could not see the actual situation of the battle. But Jiang Wang, who was quietly holding the red makeup mirror, saw the entire battle clearly. He saw that handsome white-clothed man standing opposite Bao Buozhao, who had opened the heavenly eye on his forehead. Jiang Wang could not help but ask himself in his heart, was this the heavenly palace cultivator Yung Genzuin that he had planned to challenge in the inner mansion realm? If he released everything, would he have a chance to win with the combination of a mortal sound and wrong path? At the same time, he also observed through the red makeup mirror that Lei Zhanxian had already grasped the lightning in his hand. Obviously, under the influence of the lightless ability, he did not feel safe. But that Shui Ju was still standing there coldly, as if he could adapt to this lightless environment. As for Ji Zhaonan, he was still in a relaxed posture. Jiang Wang once again raised his evaluation of Shui Ju in his heart and increased his attention. And the battle on the field was still ongoing. Under the circumstances of Xia Baoshu and Qiao Yu's consecutive defeats, Bao Buozhao's fighting spirit was still undiminished. He even launched an attack the moment Qiao Yu fell. From the beginning of the battle until now, Yung Genzuin had the upper hand, but Bao Buozhao was unscathed. Yung Genzuin was obviously avoiding him. Presumably, he was also aware of his strength. This was the respect between the strong. This was the final battle, and Bao Buozhao's real trump card was that he had already seen through Yung Genzuin's ability to move freely in the lightless area. Therefore, the vertical eye between his brows opened. The dazzling golden light of divine punishment was also dim in the lightless area. But its power did not decrease at all. At the same time, Yung Genzuin was unable to see his attack immediately. It was impossible for him to dodge the light of divine punishment through the feedback of Cheng Xuan's divine ability. In Bao Buozhao's vision, he clearly saw Yung Genzuin's body move suddenly when the light of divine punishment approached. But it was too late. A gem-like object dissipated once again. The beautiful scene faded away, and Yung Genzuin was unharmed. The third time, this was the third time Yung Genzuin's life-saving divine ability had come into play. Yung Genzuin leaped into the air and approached Bao Buozhao at an extremely terrifying speed. Bao Buozhao blinked his vertical eye and fired the light of divine punishment again. Without his vision, even Yung Genzuin's astonishing speed could not mislead his judgment. The light of divine punishment once again accurately hit his opponent. Once again, a gem-like object dissipated and blocked a fatal blow for Yung Genzuin. How could there be more? This was already the fourth time. Could it be that this divine ability could be consumed indefinitely? How could such a divine ability exist in this world? There must be a limit. Bao Buozhao was certain that this life-saving divine ability must have a limit, but he still could not suppress the anxiety in his heart. As a result, his next light of divine punishment missed its target. This could not be. The battle was not over yet. In the distant west of the starry sky, starlight flashed. In the hidden star sea, a small bell suddenly jumped out and gently shook. Clang! This bell was not a magical item, but a warning bell imbued with the word kill. Bao Guozhao cultivated both Confucianism and Shang dynasty, but the establishment of Xinglu was based on Confucianism. He took the faith of the azure dragon, the virtue of the vermilion bird, the benevolence of the black tortoise, and the kill of the white tiger. In a sense, the four words faith, virtue, benevolence, and kill were his landmarks. Theoretically, the hidden star sea was divided into four sides, opposite to the four limbs, but not exactly corresponding. Because the four limbs were on the two sides of the torso, the hidden star sea was actually in the same place. Bao Guozhao rang the warning bell in his heart, telling himself to calm down and maintain his peak. As soon as the warning bell rang, the anxiety, worry, and worry all disappeared without a trace. Bao Guozhao's mind was clear, and he accurately locked onto Yung Genzuan, who was moving at a high speed. The third eye between his eyebrows opened, and the light of divine punishment was released again. Once again, he saw the gem-like object disappear. Yung Genzuan avoided a fatal injury for the fifth time. Bao Guozhao already felt that his third eye was about to crack, and he knew that he was close to his limit. However, with the help of the warning bell, he still kept calm and tried to lock on again. However, as if endless pressure suddenly crushed his whole body. It was Cheng Xuan's divine ability. Bao Guozhao's reaction was extremely fast, and he immediately supported himself with the strength of a mountain to resist the terrifying pressure. However, a white shadow had already flashed in front of him. Yung Genzuan was coming. In the whistling wind, the sun will smashed into his face. Rumble. It was like thunder. Crack. The mountain-moving whip lashed out horizontally, and it made a crisp sound like an explosion. With the illusion of mountains, it lashed towards his opponent. Bao Guozhao couldn't dodge in time, but he didn't want to be outdone. He directly exchanged injury for injury. Bam! The two figures instantly merged. Bao Guozhao fell on his back, and blood splattered everywhere. In that extremely short moment just now, Yung Genzuan controlled the gravitational and repulsive forces hundreds of times and successfully delayed the speed of Bao Guozhao's mountain-moving whip. At the same time, he increased the speed of his sun wheel. In the end, the sun wheel smashed into his opponent's head, and Bao Guozhao's mountain-moving whip missed. Yung Genzuan stepped on Bao Guozhao, who was lying on his back, and directly stomped him to the ground, crushing all of his resistance. At the same time, he loosened his grip. The sun wheel rose and fell with a loud bang. From the looks of it, he wanted to smash Bao Guozhao into a pulp. The outcome has been decided, a voice shouted outside the arena. The lightless night was revealed by this voice. It was the voice of the Chi's state minister, Jiang Rumo. P.S. Sad face, the following words are not counted. One I am Chu Kuangren, and the Phoenix Songs laugh at Confucius. Lu Mountain rumor, Lu Mountain serving the void boat, Li Bai. The Son of Heaven calls for you, but you don't board the boat. You call yourself an immortal in wine. Song of the Eight Immortals in drinking, Du Fu. Jade carries a river of water. The crown covers the 9 heavens. 26 self-questions. How can it be? Good things in the world are not firm, and the colored glass shatters easily. The original sentence was, most good things are not firm, and the colored glass shatters easily. Jian Jianin by Juyi. 2. In order to ensure that everyone has a hearty battle experience, today's chapter is 10,000 words. 4,000 words are the minimum update, and the remaining 6,000 words are the combination of the 3 chapters. There are 3,000 monthly votes, 3,000 monthly votes, and 4,000 monthly votes. Thank you for your monthly votes. 3. There is no more tonight. Not a single drop. 4. See you tomorrow. Chapter 1034. The effect of the lightless technique dissipated. The square in front of the Imperial Ancestral Temple was bathed in sunlight again. Everyone saw 2 blazing suns at the same time. One hung in the distant sky, emitting endless light and heat. The other hung in front of Bao Buizhao, who was lying on the ground. In the distance, Chao Yu, the Winter Solitude Army, was trying to get up with his hands on the ground. Further away, Xie Bao Shu, who was once in high spirits, was still lying on the ground. No one knew if he was dead or alive. It was silent. Before Bao Buizhao's lightless god art dissipated, many people expected that Zhong Xianzun would win in the end. After all, in the previous confrontation, Xie Bao Shu was defeated so easily. The powerful ghost general was directly smashed. Yunganzun always had the upper hand. But when a moment really came, there was nothing but shock. The three outer sect experts who were beaten to a pulp were not outer sect cultivators who were there to make up the numbers. They were selected by the Government Affairs Hall of Qi to be sent to the Yellow River Gathering to compete with the Qianjiao of other countries. Of course, they were still very young and far from their peak state in the Outer Tower. They might not be comparable to some older Outer Tower cultivators. As a powerful country in the world, the Qi was too embarrassed to send older Outer Tower cultivators to the Tianjiao Gathering. How could an Outer Tower cultivator like Zhang Shi, who could descend at any time but deliberately suppressed his realm, not be strong in the Outer Tower? But how could an Outer Tower cultivator at this age be called Tianjiao? The Qi naturally had the style of a great country. But Bao Buizhao, Xie Bao Shu, and Chao Yu, who could say that they were not strong? Bao Buizhao displayed the powerful combat power of at least 3 techniques. Xie Bao Shu used the bright mirror with the crazy song and the Confucian secret technique. His combat power was not to be underestimated. And how many people dare to say that they could block Chao Yu's hidden blade for 10 years, waiting for a kill? But they all lost. They worked together to besiege their opponent, but still lost. Especially Yung Gunzuin, who had just stepped into the Outer Tower today. This battle was enough to spread throughout the world. Almost everyone's gaze, whether it was eagerness, expectation, or vigilance, fell on the man in white, fluttering clothes. Jiang Wang, who had witnessed all the details through the red makeup mirror, couldn't help but look at the dazzling sun. For some reason, his head started to ache. This Yung Ginzuin really likes to hit people's heads with his solar disk. However, this battle was truly too exciting. Every choice in the battle was remarkable, especially the Winter Solitude Army's Chao used 10 years of hiding a blade in search for a kill. It was quite similar to his famed Scholar's Destitute sword. The Qi's prime minister didn't say anything else. The audience was still in shock. Therefore, the square was quiet. The silence lasted for a while. You won. In front of the hovering, blazing sun, Bao Buizhao couldn't help but ask. Yung Gunzuin lowered his gaze and looked at him. I admit that you are more qualified to represent Qi in the Yellow River Conference. Even I am no match for you. Although Bao Buizhao was lying down, he still said gracefully, from now on, I don't dare to claim to be the best among the younger generation. Yung Gunzuin looked at him quietly for a while. Then, he closed his fingers and put away the sun. At the same time, he moved his feet away from Bao Buizhao's body and silently walked towards the center of the square. Bao Buizhao got up. In the end, he refused to give up. He looked at Lu Zhou's back and said, You won today, but the one lying on the ground won't be me forever. The path of cultivation is long. You and I still have to compete in the future. Yung Gunzuin didn't turn around. He just said calmly, I think you might have some misunderstanding. I didn't let you stay until the end because you are strong. I thought that maybe my grandfather would like to see me stepping on you for a while longer. He didn't have any emotional expression or tone, so it seemed like he was telling the truth. You are not qualified to compete with me. Bao Buizhao spat out the blood that he had been holding back for a long time. However, not many people cared about it. Only Cheng Gengsheng's fat face trembled. In his view, Yung Gunzuin's words were more lethal than the battle just now. Chongxian didn't attend the ceremony today. He rarely attended such occasions. But today's scene and Yung Gunzuin's words were bound to reach the old master's ears. And the old master was bound to be very happy. There were only 2 people with the surname Chongxian on the high platform. Even though Chung Gongsheng had expected this, it was difficult for him to be in a good mood. As for Chong Xianmingguang, his father, he was in high spirits. He looked left and right, looking around proudly. In the end, he looked at the square, raised his chin slightly, and pursed his lips. He was reserved and confident, quite the father's style. Chung Gongsheng silently rolled his eyes. He really hoped that his uncle was telling the truth. A few young eunuchs bowed and ran into the square to carry the injured out. Regardless of whether it was the soldiers, the Bao family, or the Sief family, no one came to the square to check on the injuries of the defeated. Injuries during the master ceremony would be handled by the imperial physicians. Due to the restrictions of the ceremony, the family and friends of the injured could only visit after the ceremony. Xie Bao Shu, whose life and death was unknown, was carried away. Chao Yu raised her hand and stopped the young eunuch who wanted to help her. She rested her hands on her knees and stood up straight. There were still bloodstains on her head and face, but her eyes were calm and she didn't cry out in pain. She insisted on walking out of the square by herself, but after a few steps, she stopped and slowly turned around to look at the delicate and handsome young man standing at the edge of the square with a sword. At that time, Jiang Wang was repeatedly feeling Chao Yu's two blades in his mind. The red makeup mirror allowed him to see the details of this battle clearly, and what moved him the most were these two blades. Chao Yu's blade was a straight line that divided life and death. The famous scholar's sword was also a natural and unrestrained horizontal line that divided heaven and earth. Chao Yu hid his blade for 10 years in search of kill. Su Feng, the famous scholar of the famous scholar's sword, lived a life worse than death for 18 years before he stabbed himself in the Greenstone Palace and cut open his heart. With this stab, he had taken his revenge. Chao Yu's hid his blade for 10 years in search of a kill, and the famous scholar's sword had something in common. Therefore, Jiang Wang benefited a lot from it. Following Chao Yu's gaze, many people also noticed Jiang Wang. Some of the powerhouses even felt the hidden sword intent on this young man. For a moment, they didn't know how to describe their feelings. Learning the blade in battle, Jiang Wang was still entangled with the sword style when he suddenly felt that the atmosphere was not right. He looked up and saw Chao Yu, whose face was covered in blood, walking toward him. Was he here to denounce him? Jiang Wang was a polite person. He quickly stepped forward and said, "Thank you for your guidance, General Chao." Chao Yu didn't know what to say. He even forgot why he was walking over. He nodded. He turned and left. Since everyone is so supportive and has already made it to the 11th place, then I want to make it to the top 10. At the end of the month, if you can make it to the top 10, I will write a special section and post it in the all-subscription group. This extra chapter could be Zuo Guangliya, it could be Dong, it could be the heavy, profound Buddha diagram, it could be Zhuang, Changxian, all of those dazzling, complicated, already dead characters that everyone still feels regret for, characters whose splendor everyone wants to see again. Without affecting the reading of the main text, I will write an extra chapter for each person, writing about the story that person has yet to unfold, the light that should have been shining across the sky. As for who to write, everyone will vote in the group when the time comes. Above, everyone, do your best. Requesting for monthly votes. Chapter 1035. No matter how dangerous Xie Bao Shu's situation was, how stubborn Chao Yu was, or how angry Bao Boizhao was, even though Jiang Wang's last-minute learning had attracted some people's attention. However, most people's gazes were still on Yung Genzuan. Just now, he had completed the magnificent feat of fighting 1 against 3. He had truly proven that he was the best in the younger generation of Qi and was most qualified to represent Qi in the gathering of the Yellow River. He was still holding a book in his hand. It was obvious that he had just been reading when he was summoned by Emperor Qi. He came in such a hurry, but he was so impressive. This man in white, standing alone in the middle of the square, today was truly magnificent. It was only now that people noticed. From the beginning to the end, Yung Genzuan had not moved his left hand, which was behind his back. His left hand was still holding the book. He fought 1 against 3 with only one hand, and he won. Although it was not as good as the Elder of Heaven's Mansion who had killed 3 powerful outer house experts in the inner house, it was enough to be called the best in Lindsay. Who could say no to such a performance? If such a person could not go to the gathering of the Yellow River, who else was worthy? Emperor Qi, who was sitting on a high seat, ordered Han Ling. Today, everyone in the square is from Tianjiao of Qi. Send someone to keep an eye on them and let the imperial doctors treat them. If you need any medicine, just get it. Don't worry about the cost. These words were directed at Han Ling, but of course, it was also directed at everyone. Han Ling bowed and gave a signal with his eyes. His subordinate went to carry out the order. Only then did the emperor look at the square. Chongshuan's reputation is not in vain. Yung Genzuan bowed and replied, "Your Majesty, you flatter me." Emperor Qi looked at him again and said with a smile, "What book are you reading?" This was an unimportant question, but because it was unimportant, it showed that the emperor was satisfied. "Reporting to your Majesty." Zhong Xianzun's carefree demeanor had a rare hint of unnaturalness. His hands, which were behind his back, retracted a little. Leisure book. Jiang Wang had already seen the details of the book through the red makeup mirror. However, he did not know what it was about before. Now that he heard Yung Genzuan said it was a leisure book, he had some guesses. The title of the book was Legends of 1,000 Beauties of the Nations. Under the title of the book, there was a small line of words. It should be the subtitle of the book, Secret History of Martial Emperors. It seemed that there was a mistake. This book should be about the battle between Emperor of Qi and Tianjiao of the Nations, Legends of 1,000 Talents of the Nations. It was a leisure book. However, it was also good to broaden his knowledge and experience the glory of the geniuses of various countries. If there were some battle records and commentary, it would be a very valuable book. I can buy a copy of it to read later. Emperor Qi did not ask. He only said, "Have a seat." 2 eunuchs carried a large chair tied with red silk and placed it at the edge of the square, near the imperial ancestral temple, facing the Pill Emperor. This seat represented the future of Qi. It was also to let the ancestors see the Tianjiao of the nation. Yung Genzuan lowered his head slightly and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." Then, he turned around and walked to the large chair and sat down casually. One must know that in today's Grandmaster ceremony, other than the Jiang dynasty, only the old people over 100 years old were able to sit. This was an honor. It was an honor that should be feared. However, Yung Genzuan sat down as naturally as if he was sitting at his own dining table. It was as if he was supposed to have a seat today. After Yung Genzuan sat down, a eunuch walked to the edge of the square. He did not move forward. Instead, he pressed on the ground with one hand. The cracks closed, the stones expanded, and the bloodstains disappeared. The square that was full of potholes quickly returned to its original state. Throughout the entire process, there wasn't the slightest bit of smoke and fire. It displayed an extremely exquisite control. The eunuch retracted his hand. There are no signs of a battle here. The Qi State Minister Jiang Rumo said, "Continue the ceremony." This kind of announcement was supposed to be done by the ceremonial officials. However, it was not surprising that Jiang Rumo did it. This state minister had always been low-key and peaceful. His style of governance was also very gentle. Among the past state ministers of the Qi, his control over the political affairs hall was considered weak. However, he had a good reputation in the court. Besides, as the state minister, it was his responsibility to personally preside over the Tianjiao martial arts competition today. After Jiang Rumo finished speaking, Lei Zhanqian, Jiang Wang, and Cui Ju looked at each other. They all had their own thoughts. The rules of the martial arts competition had been announced long ago. The 3 people competing for the spots would each fight 2 rounds. Thus, it was very particular about who came out first and who would fight first, when the difference in strength was similar. For example, Yung Genzuan's strength was overwhelming. He could directly fight 1 against 3. Naturally, there was no need for this. Thinking of Yung Genzuan's dazzling performance just now, Jiang Wang took a deep breath. His mind raced. I want to fight 3 as well. No, there are only 2 opponents, 1 against 2. Even if he won all of them, It was impossible to overshadow young Gunzuin's limelight. After all, there were only 3 competitors in the Intermansion realm. He couldn't make another person appear on the spot. Forget it. Since he couldn't overshadow the limelight, there was no need to expose too much. One by one, anyway, Jiang Wang made up his mind. He didn't wait for Jiang Rumo to randomly pick his opponent. He directly took a step forward and said, "Brother Lei, please enlighten me." Even if there was time to recover, in this kind of 3-person martial art competition, the first 2 people to go up would definitely be at a disadvantage. Just like in the 3 Cities Dao debate in Maplewood City, Jiang Wang took advantage of the situation and easily won. Today, he was full of confidence and didn't care about this. The changes in between were countless days and nights that he didn't waste. The reason why he chose Lei Zhanqian first was, of course, because he didn't like him and didn't want to give him an advantage. Lei Zhanqian suppressed his anger in his heart. He was already cursing in his heart, but on the surface, he was much gentlemanly. He laughed and walked forward. "Then I'll give you some advice." Today was different from the past. He had perfected his 3 mansions and improved his 9 heavens thunder amplification technique. He had great confidence in this battle. The only thing that made him unhappy was that it was Jiang Wang who spoke first. This meant, today, Jiang Wang was more confident than him. As for Cui Ju, who was from the Lightning Prison Army, he still had that cold expression. It was impossible to tell whether he was happy or not. He just quietly continued to stay at the edge of the square, leaving enough space for the 2 people facing each other. On the platform, Zhang Wuhua seemed to be trying to mend the relationship. He looked at the 2 people in the square and said with a smile, "I'll take a good look. Jiang Qingyang, who is called a hero by Wuyo, will definitely perform well." Jiang Wuyo didn't say anything. Instead, it was Jiang Wuxia who said with a smile, "I don't think he will disappoint you." "Oh," Jiang Wuhua asked, "Wuxia, you think highly of this person too?" Jiang Wuxia sniffed the wine in her cup and said with a smile, "I'm looking forward to Jiang Qingyang the most today." Perhaps they all admired Jiang Wang, but at this time, it was obvious that they didn't think highly of Lei Zhanqian. Emperor Qi's special favor for the 11th prince made these brothers and sisters feel a sense of crisis. Jiang Wuqi placed his hands on his knees and smiled without saying anything. Chapter 1036. Now, everyone's eyes were on the 2 people in the square. Compared to Cui Ju, who was not very famous, Jiang Wang and Lei Zhanqian were the Tianjiao that the people of Linzi were more familiar with. Of course, Cheng Xinfat had put in a lot of effort to promote the public duel held at the Invincible Martial Arts Arena in order to earn more money. Many people knew about that duel and knew that Lei Zhanqian had been defeated by someone 1 level higher than him. Therefore, if today's duel went smoothly, it would be Lei Zhanqian's most shameful battle. "I won't lose to you a second time," Lei Zhanqian said confidently. "This is the 3rd time," Jiang Wang emphasized seriously, "including the time in the mystery realm of 7 stars. You have already lost to me twice. This is the 3rd time." In the solemn atmosphere of the master ceremony, Cheng Gengsheng's laughter was very abrupt. Lei Zhanqian's taught arrogance was almost instantly shattered. Although what Jiang Wang said should not be the main point, the problem was that they all knew that this was indeed the truth. In the mystery realm of 7 stars, he looked down on everyone and wanted to be number 1. In the end, in the life and death chess, he was defeated by Jiang Wang with a sword that borrowed some kind of power. At that time, in the 7 Stars Valley, because of Tian Anping's sudden appearance, he was unable to get back his face. The next time they fought was in the public duel in the tattered martial arts arena. What he did not want to admit was he lost again. Moreover, under the premise that he had the advantage of cultivation, he was defeated without any fancy tricks. This was the 3rd time. How could it be the 3rd time? Lei Zhanqian opened his 5 fingers, and in an instant, lightning exploded and struck the ground. With this landing point as the center, lightning spread in all directions like a spider web, covering the entire square. At the same time, the audience behind Lei Zhanqian could clearly see the complicated thunder source totem on his back outlined by lightning, clearly visible through his clothes. The pattern was complicated, sacred, and majestic. Rumble, rumble. The sky above the square was instantly covered by dark clouds. Lightning flashed in the depths of the clouds. In the blink of an eye, the lightning apocalypse had arrived. To be honest, after witnessing Jung Ginzuin take on 3 opponents by himself, many of the spectators were immersed in a state of excitement for a long time. As a result, they felt tired of the battle in front of them. Jung Genzuin's battle was too exciting, and it raised their expectations infinitely. Looking back at the battles between the inner palace cultivators, there wasn't much to look forward to. However, once Lei Zhanxian made his move, the light and shadow shone brightly. In terms of momentum, he did not lose out to Xie Baoshu and the others who were in the outer level. No. Not only did he not lose in terms of aura, Jiang Wuyo, who was on the high platform, could clearly sense that the lightning and light intersected with each other, and the 5 directions converged, as if it had already formed a world of its own. This was an extremely terrifying killing technique that merged several types of powerful forces into one, reflecting each other's brilliance. This was definitely not something the previous Lei Zhanxian could do. It must have been Jiang Wuqi who helped to construct it. It was no wonder that Jiang Wuqi always had confidence in Lei Zhanxian and felt that he could still fight with Jiang Wang, who was famous on the Tianya stage. From a certain point of view, this technique was indeed amazing. In the instant that the spectators' expectations were aroused, Jiang Wang gently leaped up. The moment he leaped up, there was already a sea of lightning under his feet. Above him, there were thunder clouds pressing down. A long time ago, Jiang Wang and Zhuo Guangshu had discussed Lei Zhanxian's Lei Shi. At that time, Zhuo Guangshu said that Lei Zhanxian's Lei Shi's external appearance was a sign that he didn't have enough control over the Lei Shi. Because the killing intent of heaven and earth created by the thunder technique was too fierce, he couldn't adjust it in his body, so he needed to condense the Lei Shi outside. But now, Lei Zhanxian controlled thunder and lightning, but the Lei Shi didn't appear outside. This was enough to show that his development of a Lei Shi had reached a new height. That earth-shattering pressure wasn't just an illusion. Jiang Wang could completely feel how terrifying Lei Zhanxian was at this moment. But his eyes were still calm, reflecting the majestic thunder world that interacted with heaven and earth. Sound of a mortal state, open. What the ears hear, 10,000 sounds hear. Rumble, rumble. The sound of thunder almost covered all sounds. But in the sound of thunder, there were also differences. The murderous sound that was hidden in the sky was the killing intent evolved by the ninth heaven thunder developing technique. It formed the sky of the thunder world. The sea of lightning surged and covered the ground, interacting with the thunder source atlas behind Lei Zhanxian. It formed the earth of the thunder world. In Lei Zhanxian's body, the sound that was as steady and orderly as a drum was the sound of the Lei Shi. This seal connected heaven and earth, harmonizing the killing intent, and successfully merging the power of the ninth heaven thunder developing technique and the power of the thunder source atlas. It was really as seal seals heaven and earth. I am a master of thunder and lightning, harmonizing the thunder world. This was the terrifying power of the world. If Lei Zhanxian could completely master this technique, it could even be said that he could master part of the power of God's arrival in advance. Of course, his current cultivation was far from enough. He had to at least reach the outer building realm to have a slight possibility. As for now, the technique was very strong, but Lei Zhanxian himself was still too weak. In the sound of a mortal state, Jiang Wang instantly grasped all the information that could be gathered through sound. Then he stepped on the green clouds and flew towards Lei Zhanxian in the thunder world. Come, come! Lei Zhanxian opened his hands wide, and countless lightning surrounded his body, making him look like a god or a demon. This thunder world technique was a creation proposed by Jiang Wuqi, and he personally participated in it. With the help of the Lei family's elders, it was formed into a powerful killing technique. He was well aware of the significance of this move. It was a killing technique that could be passed down from generation to generation. If he hadn't cultivated the Nine Heavens Thunder Amplification Technique and the Thunder Origin Atlas from the Crimson Thunder tribe on the Void Continent to an extremely deep level, he wouldn't have been able to support Jiang Wuqi's inspiration. He wouldn't have been able to complete it and reach this level. He used this technique right off the bat to kill his opponent in one blow, wash away his humiliation, and rebuild his confidence in dominating the world. His open hands seemed to grab countless lightning bolts, intertwining them in front of him. Thunder rumbled, as if heaven and earth were intersecting. The voice naturally sounded, "I am a master of the thunder world, and I command you to slay the demon." Slay the demon. These words seemed to be the ultimate truth of heaven and earth, and Jiang Wang was naturally the demon to be slain. All the demon slayers of the thunder world were instantly mobilized from all directions and struck down at Jiang Wang. This was an extremely terrifying power, but Jiang Wang arrived on the green clouds, raising his right hand and spreading his fingers towards the sky. Whoosh! The sound of wind could be heard amidst the endless thunder. According to legend, there was a flaw in the sky in the northwest. Mount Buzhou supported it, preventing it from collapsing. The wind that blew from this point on was austere and desolate. Even heaven and earth had flaws. How could the heaven and earth created by Lei Zhanqian's thunder world be flawless? Especially since he himself was so weak, he couldn't completely control this terrifying killing technique. Jiang Wang immediately discovered the disharmony and weakness of Lei Zhanqian's thunder world. Thus, everyone saw that a corner of the lightning world that was like the fiend god realm and the sky, where the thunderclouds converge, had suddenly been blown open. The wind came from the northwest. At first, it was only a small gap, but that gap suddenly expanded at an extremely terrifying speed. In less than a breath's time, it actually blew away all the thunderclouds in the sky. The thunder world collapsed. Before the demon-slaying thunder punishment that was about to hit Jiang Wang's body fell, it had already disappeared along with the thunder world. In Jiang Wang's ears, he could still hear the unwilling roar of the lightning as it scattered. He could also hear the Lei Shi in Lei Zhanqian's body trembling nonstop, struggling to control the thunder world technique. But he didn't need to listen anymore. He stepped on the green cloud mark, appeared in front of Lei Zhanqian, and kicked. Pa! This kick directly exploded the space, sending Lei Zhanqian flying. Chapter 1037. The beginning and end of this battle were both sudden and shocking. Heaven and earth interacted to form a world of lightning. This was a killing technique that did not lose out to any Tianjiao. Furthermore, it collapsed so quickly and suddenly. Just a gust of white wind blew past, and the entire thunder world was shattered. Jiang Qingyang walked calmly through the thunder world, strolling leisurely in the oppressive world of lightning. At the moment when the thunder world collapsed and the sky was filled with lightning, he threw out such a ferocious whip kick. Pa! The air was shattered, and many people's hearts were shattered. It made people gasp in shock and intoxicated. The transition between calmness and fierceness had a soul-stirring beauty. Lei Zhanqian, who was trying his best to control Lei Shi to save the thunder world, could not react at all. His entire body flew out. He flew out of the square before being caught by the guards. He simply tilted his head and fainted. He had really fainted, but there was really no need for him to do so. Jiang Wang did not draw his sword, nor did he follow up with true samadhi fire. He only threw out a whip kick, which was only enough to knock him out of the arena, but not enough to cause too much damage. But it was too embarrassing. If he did not faint immediately, Lei Zhanqian would not know how to face his previous bold words. He would not know how to face the people who had high hopes for him. It was very difficult to defeat Jiang Wang, but to faint was very easy. The guards who caught Lei Zhanqian subconsciously wanted to wake him up. Fortunately, Jiang Wuqi said at the right time, "The killing technique has backfired. I'm afraid it will harm his foundation. Quickly send young Master Lei to rest." After helping Lei Zhanqian find a way out, he clapped his hands and praised Jiang Wang. "Brilliant. as the inspiration for the killing technique Thunderworld, as well as the person who had been accompanying Lei Zhanxian in his practice and helping him gradually perfect this killing technique. Jiang Wuqi knew very well how terrifying the killing technique Thunderworld was. He also knew very well that Lei Zhanxian was still unable to fully master this killing technique. He also knew where the weakness of the current Thunderworld was. However, this was Jiang Wang's first time seeing the Thunder Realm. This was the first time he had seen the Thunder World, but in such a short period of time, he was able to use his astonishing insight and acuity to find the weakness and defeat Lei Zhanxian so easily. This was too terrifying. No wonder Third Royal Sister said that this person was the hero of the world who could make the impossible possible. His pity for Lei Zhanxian was sincere. His admiration for Jiang Wang was also sincere. He is Deqi's son. Lei Zhanxian was defeated so quickly that it was reasonable for his cousin, Jiang Wuqi, to say a few words to salvage the situation. Therefore, the princes and princesses on the platform did not say anything. Of course, even though they were both laughing, Jiang Wuyo was definitely happier than Jiang Wuxia. The guards quickly carried Lei Zhanxian away. In the center of the Independent Square, Jiang Wang nodded slightly to express his gratitude for Jiang Wuqi's acknowledgement. It was not rude, but the distance between them was obvious. Jiang Wuqi smiled nonchalantly. Jiang Wang turned around and extended his right hand to Cui Ju, making an inviting gesture and saying, "Please." He did not need to rest. He really did not need to rest. In the eyes of the ordinary people on the platform on the left, they could only see two scenes. Thunder and lightning enveloped the square. The thunder and lightning disappeared, and Lei Zhanxian was sent flying by a whip kick. In the blink of an eye, the battle was over. Cui Ju had the typical military style. In the face of Jiang Wang's invitation, he did not waste any time and directly walked to the center of the square. Lei Zhanxian voluntarily fainted, which meant that he had given up on the next round of the martial arts competition. At this moment, after witnessing how Jiang Wang defeated Lei Zhanxian with their own eyes, not many people felt that there was a need for a third round. In the eyes of the cultivators who were not strong enough and the ordinary spectators, Jiang Wang easily crushed Lei Zhanxian. The two sides were not at the same level at all. In the eyes of the powerful cultivators, Jiang Wang had shown unparalleled fighting talent in the battle just now. He was much stronger than Lei Zhanxian. Whether they liked it or not, they had to admit, in today's Qi, Jiang Wang was the leader of the younger generation of intermansion cultivators. Perhaps Wang Yiwu, who was still in the death row prison camp, could compete, but in the army, including Cui Ju, these cultivators who were not as good as Wang Yiwu really had no chance of defeating Jiang Wang. However, Cui Ju himself didn't seem to think so. At this moment, he stood in front of Jiang Wang, still as cold as a stone statue, as if he was born without any emotions. Of course, he didn't cower or feel fear. At this moment, Jiang Wang's back was facing the Imperial Ancestral Temple, and he was facing the Emperor of the Qi. Cui Ju was facing him, facing the Imperial Ancestral Temple. In a huge square, only the two of them were facing each other. The spectators on the field were the white-clothed Yung Ganzuan and the silver-armored Ji Zhaonan. "Let's start," Jiang Rumo said lightly. As soon as he finished speaking, the two of them were already facing each other. Why did Jiang Wang defeat Lei Zhanxian in such a fierce manner? Because Yung Ganzuan was the champion of Linzi today, he also needed to show his edge so that Cheng Gongsheng wouldn't be so dim in comparison. He did this to Lei Zhanxian and also to Cui Ju. Therefore, at the beginning of the battle, Jiang Wang skipped probing and directly closed in, seeking victory. The moment he closed in, he opened his 5 fingers, and the white Buzhou wind leaped out, transforming into 6 death spikes, and approached Cui Ju with the momentum of an inescapable net. Yung Ganzuan only used 3 theurgies to defeat his opponent, and hid 2. Even if he only used 1 Buzhou wind, he was still hiding 2. And this Buzhou wind blowing into death spikes was a new usage he developed. 6 long spikes as black as the night, with a touch of frost at the tip. Trailing a white trail, They shot forward at an astonishing speed. They faintly locked onto all the positions in front of the opponent, targeting the head, heart, and limbs. This was such a cold and cruel theurgy. It killed the life, extinguished the soul, and killed the life of the spikes. Chui Ju couldn't take it head-on, so he retreated. He retreated at a terrifying speed. His figure was like a ghost, so fast that he left behind a long string of afterimages, shaking off the pursuit of the death spikes. He retreated a bit far. There was no need to retreat so far. Just as Jiang Wang had this thought in his mind, he saw Chui Ju suddenly turn around, facing the Emperor of Da Qi directly. No! Jiang Wang pulled with his left hand, and the chains that he prepared beforehand drilled out of the void. This was originally to restrict Chui Ju's space of movement, allowing the death spikes to take effect easily. At this moment, two pitch-black chains crisscrossed, blocking in front of Chui Ju, and Chui Ju's body was already disintegrating, the kind of disintegration that turned into ashes. The disintegration started from his limbs and spread to his heart. This disintegration provided him with terrifying strength. Therefore, he threw out a javelin, a gray javelin that was constantly spinning and accelerating, nourished by his flesh, spirit, and even lifespan. Crack! This javelin broke Jiang Wang's chains with one strike and flew towards the Emperor of Da Qi. And Chui Ju shouted loudly, with an indescribable madness in his voice, "Year 31 of Shun Wu. Chui Ju stabs Jiangshu." This voice reverberated endlessly, spreading far and wide. His target was actually the Emperor of Da Qi, and it was in front of the important imperial ancestral temple, in the ceremony of the Great Master, in front of the civil and military officials of Da Qi, as well as the spectators. He threw the javelin to stab the Emperor of Da Qi. What kind of crazy act was this? Jiang Wang reacted quickly, instantly activating the immortal sound state, and with a grab of one hand, he annihilated Chui Ju's voice, preventing it from continuing to spread. But what should have been heard had already been heard. What he didn't hear would be known later. It was nothing more than mending the pen after the sheep were lost. At the same time, Jiang Wang crushed the blue cloud mark with one foot, displaying his fastest speed, and quickly approached Chui Ju's back. In a small space, he had a meteoric rise. All of this seemed to take a long time to describe, but it actually happened in an instant. Chui Ju and Jiang Wang retreated as soon as they met, faster and faster, and then threw the javelin towards the Emperor of Da Qi. After throwing the javelin, Chui Ju suddenly turned around before he rushed out of the square, and his eyes met with Jiang Wang's. His expression was deranged, and there was a kind of devotion in his eyes. "I have no regrets." This was his voice, a voice that Jiang Wang had forbidden to spread, but still fell into Jiang Wang's ears. Chui Ju's body was still falling apart, disintegrating at a rapid pace. His flesh and blood, his spirit, his lifespan, his fate, his entire life. Everything was falling apart. Clang! Jiang Wang's long sword slashed through the air amidst Xiangxi's soft cry. But he was already dead, completely dead. The long sword chopped Chui Ju to pieces, but it also seemed to have cut nothing. And that terrifying, deathly gray javelin that was constantly spinning and accelerating collapsed soundlessly before it could even approach the Pill Emperor. The ceremony directorate's great eunuch Han Ling stood with his hands in his sleeves, expressionless, as if he hadn't attacked at all. And the scene was absolutely silent. There wasn't a single sound in front of the imperial ancestral temple. This had nothing to do with Jiang Wang's sound-controlling Dao technique. Even the sound of breathing had stopped. Of course, no one spoke. Who dared to speak at this time? If anything went wrong, today's matter would evolve into a huge catastrophe. Although the Qi Emperor was generous with his rewards, when he was ruthless, he wouldn't show any mercy. Many years ago, someone had said this about the Qi Emperor, saying that he was a mighty ruler. Whether it's kindness or punishment, there's no increase. Many people only saw the Qi Emperor's boundless favor and how talented people could rise to the heavens in Qi, but they often neglected the fact that there was no increase in punishment. How could the withered yard, which had branches all over the Qi region, only be left in ruins in Linzi City? There weren't any other places, not even ruins. The dethroned crown prince, Jiang Wuliang, had been endlessly favored. Every time the Qi emperor went to war, he was allowed to govern the country. Even when the Qi emperor was in the imperial court, he often let Jiang Wuliang handle political affairs. But what if he lost his favor? The so-called henchmen of the dethroned crown prince were almost all killed, and Jiang Wuliang was imprisoned in the Bluestone Palace in the 35th year of the Yuanfeng era. Now, it was the 55th year of the Yuanfeng era. The emperor hadn't seen him for a whole 20 years. This was the emperor's biological son, the son he had the deepest feelings for. And today, on the big day of the martial arts competition in front of the emperor to select the country's heavens chosen, one of the heavens chosen actually plotted to assassinate the emperor. If this matter was investigated, first of all, the commander of the Lightning Prison Army, Xiao Yuan, would have to be dismissed. He might even lose his life. And the people who recommended Cui Zhu to the list, the officials who were selected along the way, and even the people who personally selected Cui Zhu from the political affairs hall, would all have to bear the responsibility. This responsibility, no one could bear it. The emperor of the Qi was sitting on the dragon throne. No one could look at him directly, so no one could see his expression clearly. He was expressionless. The emperor's thoughts were as deep as the sea. If he didn't speak, no one dared to speak. So he spoke. He said lightly, "Qingyang townsman, you have meritorious service in protecting the emperor. I'll remember this merit and reward you after the Yellow River meeting." This was not stingy, but a great honor. Capturing and killing an Intermansion Realm assassin could be considered a big merit, but it could also be considered a small one. In fact, Jiang Wang couldn't stop Cui Zhu, and Cui Zhu couldn't get close to the Emperor of Qi. But Jiang Wang stopped Cui Zhu immediately and decisively cut off the sound to reduce the impact of the assassination. This decisive action undoubtedly added a lot of points to him. The Emperor of Qi chose to remember this merit and had high hopes for Jiang Wang. Once Jiang Wang could achieve great merit in the Yellow River meeting, Jiang Wang would be able to cross some difficult boundaries in one fell swoop. He had just entered the Qi dynasty 2 years ago, so he was not as reliable as Cheng Gengsheng and Li Longchuan. It was difficult for him to gain the same trust as them. Therefore, there were some thresholds that were actually invisible and very difficult to cross. But there were exceptions. When Emperor Wu of Qi restored the country, how many obscure surnames became prominent? Some came to the Qi dynasty with Emperor Wu of Qi, and because of their achievements in restoring the country, they became nobles of the Qi dynasty. Jiang Wang retracted the killing nail that was still circling in the air and sheathed his sword. He saluted with his hands folded. "I only did what I was supposed to do. I dare not claim credit." He was a 4th-grade blue medal of the Qi dynasty. Speaking of which, arresting criminals was indeed his job. The Emperor of the Qi said, "Jiang Wang, you are very good. I didn't misjudge you." When he said that he did not see wrongly, he was naturally referring to the time when Donghua Pavilion bestowed a purple robe. Without waiting for Jiang Wang to reply to show his loyalty, he suddenly asked, "Do you know why this thief wanted to assassinate me today, even though he knew it was impossible?" Jiang Wang said carefully, "I don't know." Of course, he knew that the emperor wasn't just asking him this question. At the same time, he really didn't know the answer. Do you all know? The emperor of the Qi looked at the nobles and officials. On the high platform, the officials and generals looked at each other. In the face of such a dangerous question, no one dared to speak first. But the emperor gave the answer himself. He sneered. "This is an imitation of Emperor Huai of the Qin kingdom." The nobles and officials seemed to be frozen. They didn't even dare to raise their heads. Jiang Wang even heard the sound of someone sucking in a cold breath. The weight of the Emperor of the Qi's words was obvious. But he didn't understand what was Emperor Huai of the Qin kingdom. After becoming a transcendent, he didn't have enough time to cultivate every day. Naturally, he didn't have time to read history. before becoming a transcendent. He did read some books, but it wasn't enough to memorize the history of all the countries in the world. The Emperor of Deqi obviously noticed Jiang Wang's confusion. He said calmly, "Crown Prince, you're the Crown Prince. Explain it to him." This level of examination couldn't stump the Crown Prince, but it was dangerous for him to speak at this moment. Jiang Wuhua was still calm. He stood up and bowed respectfully before saying, "During the time of Emperor Huai of the Qin Kingdom, some members of the imperial clan wanted to rebel, but they were hesitant. In June of that year, there was a court official who assassinated Emperor Huai on the imperial road. Since then, the world knew that the court was unstable and that Emperor Huai had lost the support of the people. So, Yingzhong led the army and killed Emperor Huai in the Xianying Palace. He ascended the throne in the same year and became Emperor Xian of Qin. The current royal family of Qin is this branch." Jiang Wang was shocked when he heard this. The Emperor of Deqi stood up and stood in front of the dragon throne. He looked down at all his subjects and asked in a not strict voice, "Who has this intention?" Plop! Jiang Wuhua knelt down and pressed his forehead to the ground. From the Emperor of Dan's high platform, from the princes and princesses to the civil and military officials and the nobles, even the common people, everyone knelt on the ground. Chapter 1038. The Emperor of Deqi's problem was too serious. He directly defined Shui Ju's assassination as the beginning of a plot to usurp the throne. If things were to unfold in such a way, there would be heads rolling and wailing everywhere. From the political affairs hall, to the people who were on the list of the Yellow River meeting, to Shui Ju's promotion in the military, to the people he met and befriended. How big of a net was this? How many people were involved in this? Who wouldn't be afraid? The wrath of the emperor would cause millions of corpses and thousands of miles of blood. Who would dare to touch it? At this moment, ordinary people had no right to speak. Those who had the right to speak, such as the crown prince, the palace masters, and even the prime minister Jiang Rumo, couldn't speak. Because if it were to be compared to the past of Emperor Huai of Qin, then it was precisely these people who had the chance to become the Emperor of Qi. The case of the dethroning of the crown prince involved many people. Many people who had experienced that catastrophe were still present. The prestigious Zheng Genjie, the old Duke of Chongxian, who had taken off his armor a long time ago, put on his armor and went back to the battlefield. 2 of his sons had died, and Chongxian Chuliang had broken the chief merit of Xia. Only then did he survive that catastrophe. The son of the former Tianjiao Chongxian, who had once been the Buddha of Tianjiao, was now in the audience. The warning was not far away. Who wouldn't be afraid? "Your Majesty, I have a memorial." Jiang Wang, who was also kneeling on the ground, suddenly spoke. The current Emperor of Qi was a hero of a generation. When he trusted someone, he could be gracious, but when he disliked someone, he could also be cold and ruthless. Of course, Jiang Wang knew that it was dangerous to speak at this moment. As someone who had just been praised by the emperor for his loyalty, he could have remained silent. Things like usurping the throne should not be done by him, a man from the small Qingyang town who did not have any foundation. He was undoubtedly safe, but as Cheng Gengsheng's best friend, he had a deep impression of the catastrophe 30 years ago. He believed that Cheng Gengsheng had enough wisdom to face all the problems of the world. Only things that had happened could never be changed. Cheng Gengsheng's weakness and pain had only been exposed to him in 14. In the ruins of the withered yard, Cheng Gengsheng, who was always thick-skinned, said, "I feel very lonely." The death of Cheng Xinfu too had caused great harm to Cheng Gengsheng that could never be erased. As for the Zheng Genjie, compared to the henchmen of the dethroned crown prince, whose entire family had been exterminated, it could be considered a very good outcome. "Minister Jiang, please speak your mind." Emperor Deqi's voice was emotionless. "Am I a monarch who cannot speak freely?" In front of the imperial ancestral temple, the kneeling civil and military officials, as well as the nobles and clansmen, did not dare to raise their heads to look, but they all pricked up their ears. Chung Gung Shung knelt on the ground. Even with his cultivation, he was sweating profusely. It was extremely difficult for him to endure. 14 silently knelt beside him. From Chung Gung Shung's reaction, he knew the danger at this moment. Yin Fu resisted the urge to look left and right. Especially at this time, it was even more important not to contact too many people. The assassination had just happened, and it was the time when the emperor was most vigilant against forming cliques. However, if he did not borrow the influence of the Yin family in the political affairs hall, how could he speak at this time? Huaying Palace's palace master held her breath, thinking about what to say if the situation was not good. Would her father forgive Jiang Qingyang for her sake? Your Majesty. Jiang Wang raised his head, not daring to look directly at the emperor's face. He only looked at the engravings on the Dan emperor. I am young and weak. I am not familiar with history or books. I have traveled thousands of miles, seen the scenery of various countries, and seen thousands of people. I have learned a thing or two. There are good and evil people, but it is difficult to distinguish between them. When people are mixed into one, loyalty and treachery will always exist. Those who have nothing will inevitably change. Those who have power and influence will inevitably be arrogant. Those who have accumulated a few things to rely on will inevitably have thoughts that they should not have in the dead of night. These are the thoughts of a person, and it is difficult to get rid of them. As the saying goes, a gentleman does not talk about his heart. In terms of heart, there is no perfect person in the world. However, our Qi is strong and powerful, and we have millions of soldiers in armor. In our own territory, the empire is the only ruler. In the eastern region, those who touch us will die. Looking at the whole world, there are only 4 or 5 families who can fight for it. I think that whoever has this heart is not to be feared. Whoever has this power is the one who needs it. He placed his hands on the ground and touched the back of his hands with his forehead. Lord Fu Qi is wise. What a good! Whoever has this heart is not to be feared. Whoever has this power is the one who needs it. The emperor of Qi looked down at the kneeling young man in the square. Then who do you think has this power? Jiang Wang said respectfully, Your Majesty, you are the ruler who established Qi's hegemony. Qi is the country that dominates the eastern region. I think that today there is no one in the Qi region who has this power. Therefore, when Shui Ju assassinated the ruler, I think it is not the same as the old Qin. Shui Ju is just an inner residence, and his power is not even as strong as me. His assassination could not get close to the emperor. The Qi is vast, and there are countless people who are stronger than me. If an ant fights to the death, what can it do to a tree that reaches the sky? How can the hatred of a weak ant shake the foundation of the Qi? However, Jiang Wang took a deep breath and said, If your Majesty is angered by an ant, I think that ant will have no regrets. Although the words that Shui Ju said to Jiang Wang before his death were purposely destroyed by Jiang Wang, the Emperor of Qi would not miss it. Now that Jiang Wang said this, it meant that the Emperor of Qi's anger might be what the assassin wanted to see. He thought that today's matter was not the start of a plot to usurp the throne. Within the Qi region, no one had the right to change the dynasty. Therefore, the instigator of this matter could only come from outside the country. Shui Ju's assassination obviously had a motive behind it. However, if the Emperor of Qi was angry and punished indiscriminately, the instigator would be happy to see it. Jiang Wang said it tactfully, but no matter how tactful it was, it still offended the Emperor of Qi. After all, the Emperor of Qi was a mighty ruler, and he, Jiang Wang, was just a man from Qingyang town. The Emperor of Qi did not comment and said lightly, Jiang Qingyang, how dare you? Only under the rule of a wise ruler can there be a good official who dares to speak. Only when the Saint Lord is in power can there be a voice from the bottom of his heart. Jiang Wang replied, My courage is given by your Majesty. The Emperor of Qi was silent for a moment. Therefore, the entire imperial ancestral temple was silent for a moment. Where's the patrol commandant? The Emperor of Qi asked. The patrol commandant of the capital city was the northern Yamen commandant that people often referred to. Zheng Shi was not present at the ceremony. At this moment, he squeezed out of nowhere and bowed to the Emperor of Qi. "I am here." The Emperor of Qi ordered, "This matter is for you to investigate thoroughly. I give you the right to use the night watchman. No matter who is involved, do not let it go." After a pause, he added, "Do not implicate the innocent." To prevent abuse of power, the northern Yamen commandant's cultivation could not exceed the outer building realm. This also made it difficult for the northern Yamen commandant to use the blue metal of the outer building even though he had power. The night watchmen were only loyal to the Qi royal family, and their strength was terrifying. This matter was handed over to the northern Yamen commandant to investigate, and not the ceremony supervisor Han Ling, which made all the officials and nobles present heave a sigh of relief. The Emperor of Qi's last sentence also made everyone feel relieved. The sweat on Cheng Gengsheng's forehead stopped. Too beautiful, too beautiful. If not for the fact that the occasion was not right, he really wanted to raise Jiang Wang up and cheer. Perhaps Jiang Wang was just speaking out of compassion. However, he hit the nail on the head and convinced the Emperor of Qi. So what if Cheng Xian was talented? Today, all of Linzi was amazed by him. However, Jiang Qingyang had won the gratitude of half of Linzi. PS1. Steal once. The stealing here meant that it was done in private. Chapter 1039. Yes, Your Majesty. The North Yamen Commandant Zheng Shi hurriedly left. This matter was not easy to investigate. Who knew how many years of preparation Cui Ju had taken to assassinate the Qi Emperor? How would a mastermind leave such a mark so easily? Cui Ju had died so cleanly that even his soul had been destroyed. There was no way to get any information from him. Furthermore, for him to be able to enter the elite Qi Jun army, like the Lightning Prison Army, and obtain the position of Deputy General in the infamous Qi Jun army, as well as obtain the high regard of the Lightning Prison Army Commander Xiu Yuan. This was not something that could be accomplished in a short period of time. For him to be able to enter the final list of the Yellow River meeting, it was not easy. This was not only about ability, but also a clean background. It should be known that even the commoners who came to watch the ceremony were all Qi people whose family backgrounds have been clean for several generations. If Jiang Wang did not have the support of the Zhongenjia and the help of Yin Fu, it would be difficult for him to enter the list. After all, if the Qianjiao was not loyal to the country, it would be the laughing stock of the country. For Cui Ju to be able to reach this step and find a chance to throw that spear at the Qi Emperor, there were many factors involved. There were countless links behind this that could be influenced by others. This was the reason why the Qi Emperor was enraged, and also the reason why the civil and military officials were terrified. For the former, every possible link that could be affected could be a hidden traitor. To the latter, every possibility could implicate them, regardless of whether they were clean or not. Zheng Shi had to make use of every second to find the truth and dig out the traitor before the other party wiped out all traces. They were both searching for clues, but the methods used by the inspection office in the capital and the eunuchs in the palace were naturally different. The former took orders from the emperor, but was also under the supervision of the political affairs hall and did things within the rules. The latter, on the other hand, only received the emperor's orders. Everything was only loyal to the emperor's pleasure and anger, especially when the Qi emperor was so furious. One could say that Jiang Wang's words today had saved many people from danger. He had won the hearts of the people. Although many people could not say it out loud, they would remember this favor in their hearts. After handing over the assassination case to Zheng Shi, Emperor Qi returned to his dragon throne. Everyone, please rise. The ceremony of the master is not over yet. There's no need to rush to leave. It was as if nothing had happened. The civil and military officials silently stood up. He then heard the emperor say, "In this meeting of the Yellow River, Yung Genzuan stood out among the crowd." In the inner mansion realm, Jiang Wang was the best. Tianjiao is the capital of our country. Everyone can see that. In addition, Ji Zhaonan was unanimously recommended by the Political Affairs Hall as the #1 person under Su Wei. Zhen is also pleased. These three people represent the Qi in the Battle of the Yellow River. The honor and disgrace of the nation are tied to me. I cannot relax. Jiang Wang, Yun Genzuan, and Ji Zhaonan all bowed. We are willing to die for the Qi. If one were to say that the current Qi emperor trusted a person, he would be extremely gracious. Even when he was so angry today, he gave Jiang Wang a chance to reprimand him and did not even bother about his offense. Looking at the three Tianjiao, he said with satisfaction, Tianjiao, I have to reward the Tianjiao. Han Ling took a step forward and said, Ji Zhaonan, Yun Genzuan, and Jiang Wang are each bestowed with a secret technique of the empire. They can choose from those of the same realm. They are also bestowed with a magical artifact from the emperor's treasury. They can choose from those of the same realm. In addition, after 3 days of burning incense, please come to the hot spring palace to bathe. 5 days later, please go to the general appointment stage to receive pointers from the experts for 5 days. I hope all of you will work hard to prepare for the Riverview platform. That's all. Whether it was the secret technique of the empire or the magical artifacts from the emperor's treasury, they were all extremely precious. The hot spring palace and the general appointment stage were places that many people dreamed of. Not to mention, what level would the expert that the emperor sent out to teach him battle techniques be? And this was just going to the Riverview platform. They had yet to display their flags. The emperor's reward was indeed unimaginable. Jiang Wang, Yun Genzuan, and Ji Zhaonan bowed together. Apart from being extremely grateful, they could not say anything else. After Han Ling announced the decree, Emperor Qi raised his hand to signal the end of the ceremony of the master. Thus, the emperor and empress left, followed by the princes and princesses. As for the civil and military officials, they all left one after another. Only Han Ling walked to the square and said to Jiang Wang and the other two, You can come and take the secret technique and magical artifact from the emperor's treasury at any time in these 10 days. Why don't you go back and think about what you need? Ji Zhaonan nodded. To be honest, these two things were not very attractive to him. As a disciple of the army god, he had everything he wanted and needed. Yun Genzuan smiled and said, Thank you, eunuch. As the son of the first wife of the Chongxin family, he did not lack for anything. Only Jiang Wang sincerely held Han Ling's hand and said emotionally, I will definitely think about it. Han Ling was speechless. You are all the Tianjiao of the country and the pride of the Qi. I will wait for you with burning incense, he said with a smile. He quietly withdrew his hand and turned to leave. Ji Zhaonan smiled at Jiang Wang and left without looking at Yun Genzuan. Yun Genzuan looked at Jiang Wang as if he just got to know him. Have we met before? It had to be said that this kind of person who was the best in Linzi had an irresistible charm when he showed an intimate attitude. Of course, Jiang Qingyang and I sent you off outside the G Gate last year. Cheng Gengsheng's voice sounded at the right time, his face full of smiles. Brother, you have broken out of seclusion and are so elegant. This younger brother is really happy. The injuries you suffered on the battlefield of Chiang seem to have been worth it. Jiang Wang was speechless. Can you still find those injuries on your body now? Yun Genzuan also smiled. When he was not smiling, he was like a jade tree facing the wind. When he smiled, he was like a pear tree full of pear blossoms. I will remember all the good you have done for me. I really don't know how to repay you. Cheng Gengsheng's smile became even brighter, so bright that his eyes could not be seen. How about you give me the position of the head of the family? Even though Yun Genzuan was the best in Linzi, he did not know how to respond. He thought he heard wrong. How could there be such meaningless nonsense? Cheng Gengsheng was not annoyed. He smiled and said, Brother, if you don't know how to repay me, why don't you give me the position of the head of the family? This will also be a good story for us. Yun Genzuan was silent for a moment. He reached out and patted Cheng Gengsheng's shoulder. Sheng, do your best. He could not continue the conversation, so he decided not to. He expressed his encouragement to his chubby brother and turned to leave. Cheng Gengsheng shouted behind him, Brother, don't worry. You just came out and don't understand the situation. You can take your time to think about it. I'm still young. I can wait. Young Genzuin did not turn around. He only waved behind him with a hand, holding the book. He smiled and said, "Then wait." I added this paragraph in the wee hours of the morning after I finished browsing the book friend circle. I like reading book reviews too much. I like browsing the book friend circle too much. My readers are too good. Everyone is very gentle and patient. They talk to each other, explain their doubts, and seriously discuss the plot. I'm too happy writing books. I feel too happy. At this moment, my heart is so soft. Compared to the gentleness you give me, all the suffering is not worth mentioning. Chapter 1040. As Yung Gunzuin walked out, Chong Mingwang came over happily. You did well today. You didn't embarrass your father. Yung Gunzuin pressed his forehead with a finger, feeling a little helpless. As long as you're satisfied. Satisfied. Uncle Chongshuan's face was flushed. By the way, what did your cousin say to you? It had to be said that when the father and son walked together, the old was handsome and the young was dashing. It was very pleasing to the eye. Say hello, Yung Genzuin said casually. You have to be careful. This little fatty has a lot of tricks up his sleeve. Chongxian Mingguang actively complained. If I hadn't helped you look after it, your family business would have been emptied. Jixia Academy was an extraordinary place. As a Qianjiao who cultivated in seclusion, he was in a different area. He had no contact with the outside world, and it was impossible for him to come into contact with the ordinary lecturers on duty. He had been in Jixia Academy for half a year, truly isolated from the world. Therefore, he was a little surprised when he heard this. Didn't I arrange for someone to help take care of it? Chongxian Mingguang rolled his eyes. Don't mention it. He's not good at anything. He's just a brute. Yung Genzuin, it was indeed inconvenient for him to say anything about his biological father's complaints. TSK, it's a small matter. Chongxian Mingguang waved his hand. It's easy now that you've come out of seclusion. I have a serious matter for you. I want to expand my private residence in the north of the city, but the neighbors refuse to move. Go and talk to them. It's not that I'm embarrassed. It's just that it's easier to communicate with young people like you. Okay. Yung Genzuin was helpless. At the same time, he felt an inexplicable sense of uneasiness coming from nowhere. That's right. He suddenly remembered. Why didn't Wang Yiwu come to the master's ceremony today? Even if this guy was still polishing his new limit in the soaring dragon realm, even if the emperor's order to summon him out of seclusion was sudden, he should have received the news and come over. Could it be that the army god had arranged for him to go somewhere to train again? In the square, Zhang Wang smiled and said, If he had fought with you just now, I wouldn't have been able to help. Cheng Gung Sheng giggled and asked, If he did not enter the outer tower today, would you have a chance of winning against him in the inner tower? He seemed to be very relaxed, but this question was somewhat serious. Zhang Wang thought for a while and said truthfully, no. If it was a life and death battle, he naturally wouldn't shrink back. However, this was only a discussion of the outcome of the battle on paper. Today, Yung Gunzuin's strength was not limited to the strength of the 5 sacred arts. His development and application of divine arts were also superb. With the combination of Chongxian divine arts and Chongxian secret arts, he completed a performance that looked like he was using unlimited divine arts. He was simply toying with his opponent in the palm of his hand. The Sun Wheel divine art was also freely released in his hands, and he could use it with his heart. From afar, it could suppress ghost generals and exorcise evil spirits. At close range, it could be used as a weapon to attack and defend. Coupled with his terrifying, life-saving divine art and the top-notch combat talent he displayed in this battle. Even so, he still had 2 divine arts that he had yet to use. From beginning to end, he only used one hand to fight. Zhang Wang thought about his own situation and found it hard to say whether he would win. Cheng Gungsheng was not surprised by this answer. He only laughed and patted Zhang Wang. Let's go. I'll take you to see a friend. Zhang Wang did not know what this fatty was up to and could only follow him. With Cheng Gungsheng in the lead and 14 in the lead, the three of them walked around and soon arrived at a quiet and secluded building complex. On the door of the main courtyard hung a plaque with the words, Imperial Academy of Medicine. Seeing the guard at the door, Chung Gung-sheng smiled and said without waiting for an interrogation, I'm Chung Gung-sheng, a good friend of young Master Xie. I'm here to see him. Is young Master Xie awake now? He seems to be awake, the guard said. Then I'll go in and take a look, Chung Gung-sheng said, and walked in. As the son of the first wife of the Zhonggenjia and the son of the Tianjiao, it was not a problem for him to walk around the Imperial Academy of Medicine and visit his friends. The guard would not stop him. They walked in, and Chung Gung-sheng asked for directions again. Then, he found a room and pushed the door open with light steps. Xie Baoshu, who was wrapped up like a dumpling, suddenly sat up on the bed and looked at Chung Gung-sheng warily. He had to be careful. This fatty could shout and curse at the Imperial Ancestral Temple earlier. Now, he might beat him up while he was injured. However, Chung Gung-sheng was full of smiles and was very affectionate. Brother Xie, I'm here to see you. How are you? Are you well? Xie Baoshu was alert. What do you want? Here's the thing. Actually, I've always admired you, Brother Xie. Chung Gung-sheng patted Jiang Wang's shoulder and raised his voice. My friend Jiang Qingyang. He admires you even more and hopes to receive your guidance on the way to the Yellow River meeting. Unfortunately, you can't go. Ha 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 ha. His laughter was arrogant and presumptuous. Almost half of the Imperial Academy of Medicine heard it. Xie Baoshu's handsome face instantly darkened to the point of no return. But before he could do anything, Chung Gung-sheng had already left. Jiang Wang and Shi followed him silently and left. After they walked out of the Imperial Academy of Medicine, Jiang Wang asked, You came to the Imperial Academy of Medicine just to humiliate him with his words? Chung Gung-sheng only asked, Are you happy? Jiang Wang shook his head. I didn't knock him out. Chung Gung-sheng was speechless. Then next time you knock him out yourself, and then laugh at him again, Chung Gung-sheng said. This time, it has its value. Before Jiang Wang could ask, he asked first, after seeing Yung Ganzuan's performance today, do you still have confidence in me? Jiang Wang thought for a moment, and then said, Yes. It was this pause that showed how serious he was. Chung Gung-sheng smiled. Unfortunately, not everyone is like you. I give them benefits. But if it was just the benefits, it would not be enough. I have to give them confidence. He said, So I have to be more arrogant than before. If they provoke me, I must provoke them back. If they don't provoke me, I will bully them. He argued with Yung Ganzuan in the square in front of the Imperial Ancestral Temple and came to the Imperial Academy of Medicine to humiliate Xie Baoshu, all because of this reason. Of course, venting his anger was also in passing. After hearing this, Jiang Wang thought for a moment and then turned to walk back to the Imperial Academy of Medicine. Hey, what are you doing? Chung Gung-sheng asked. I have a friend here with the surname Lei. Let's not talk about how Lei Zichen was furious. After the small man got his way, the few people who felt refreshed swaggered back to the Xiao Mountain Villa. At this time, Chung Gung-sheng naturally wouldn't go back to the Marquis Boang's mansion to be compared. Jiang Wang went straight back to his room to cultivate in seclusion. In fact, he already had the inspiration when he was in the Imperial Ancestral Temple. It was just that it wasn't convenient at that time, and he also had to cooperate with Chung Gung-sheng to create momentum. Therefore, it was only now that he could calm down and cultivate. His inspiration came from Lei Zhanqian, who he had just humiliated. It was that Thunderworld. In that short fight, Jiang Wang understood the weakness of the Thunderworld and easily broke it. Understanding the weakness naturally meant that he understood the Thunderworld to a certain extent. What was the core of the Thunderworld? The Thunder Seal, the Thunder Essence Totem, and the Nine Heavens Thunder Developing Technique. And Jiang Wang just so happened to have the true Samadhi Fire, the Fire Essence Totem, as well as an extraordinary ability to control fire. Of course, he also had the Great Illusionary Lands Dao Development Platform, which could already be piled up to 6 levels. Chapter 1041. The process of defeating Lei Zhanqian was very easy. However, no one would overlook the power of that thunder world. Although Lei Zhanqian was defeated, he still had a bright future ahead of him. And Jiang Wang just so happened to have grasped the fire essence totem that originated from the same place as Lei Zhanqian. He also had fire elemental's supernatural powers. Under such suitable conditions, he naturally wanted to use the thunder world to deduce the fire world. This did not mean that Jiang Wang was so talented that he could learn his opponent's secret technique in one exchange. The most important reason was that Lei Zhanqian was not able to control this killing technique. In the process of battle, the weaknesses that could not be fixed were clearly seen. The framework behind this killing technique was thus exposed, and Jiang Wang used his immortal sound perception to perfectly receive all the information that sound could provide. He truly had a certain level of understanding of this killing technique. This was the prerequisite for deducing the fire world. The fire essence totem and true samadhi fire were the foundation for deducing the fire world. This matter was said to be a matter of time and place. Thinking about it, success would come naturally. However, it was not that easy to actually do it. For this thunder world, Zhang Wuqi was the one who provided the genius idea. Lei Zhanqian was the one who filled in the details, and the few powerful elders of the Lei family were the ones who filled in the details. Lei Zhanqian himself had cultivated the Nine Heavens thunder amplification technique for many years. He was also a well-known figure in Tianjiao. To be able to secure his position as the successor of the Lei family, he naturally would not be too bad. Although he was defeated time and time again by Jiang Wang, it did not erase his excellence. Although the Lei family was not as famous as the Zhonggenjia or the Li family, they still had a few powerful elders. Moreover, the Lei family was famous for their thunder techniques. This was their specialty. With the combination of these three factors, the killing technique Thunder World was formed. It was also because of its power and terror that Lei Zhanqian couldn't wait to use it to deal with Jiang Wang before he could fully control it. If Jiang Wang wanted to replicate it easily, it was undoubtedly a fool's dream. Fortunately, he had come up with a new way to use the dreamlike token. Using its ability to build dreams, he brought the scene of his battle with Lei Zhanqian into his dream and observed it repeatedly. Reviewing the battle had always been his habit after every battle in the great illusionary realm. With the dream token, the efficiency of summarizing the lessons learned had increased. After spending half a day in his room trying to figure it out over and over again, he finally managed to come up with some ideas. He let out a long sigh. Without that sudden flash of inspiration and the necessary accumulation of experience, it would be extremely difficult to construct a good spell technique. Everything was difficult at the beginning, but with a clear idea, things would be easier. At this moment, Jiang Wang withdrew his mind from the construction of the spell. Then he heard the sound of breathing and heartbeat outside the door. With a casual wave of his hand, the door opened. Two beautiful maids were guarding the door. As soon as the door opened, the maid on the left carrying a basket of flowers immediately said, "Young master, please wait a moment. The water is ready. Bathe immediately." Jiang Wang was stunned. The maid on the right had already entered the room with her head lowered. She put down the three-legged cloud-swallowing incense burner in her hands. Smoke rose in spirals, floating with a refreshing fragrance. Two servants carried in a large bathtub. The other two servants poured 4 buckets of hot water into the bathtub, then silently left the room. The maid on the left came in at this moment. She closed the door and sprinkled the flower petals in the basket evenly on the water surface. Then, she tested the water with her slender fingers. She looked up and smiled at Jiang Wang. "Young master, the water temperature is suitable. Please change and bathe." At this moment, Jiang Wang remembered that in 3 days, he would go to the hot spring palace to enjoy a heavenly bath. Before that, he would have to burn incense for 3 days. Needless to say, these two maids must have been arranged by Cheng Gongsheng. From the looks of it, they had been waiting outside the door, afraid that they would disturb Jiang Wang's cultivation. Jiang Wang raised his hand and stopped the maid who had put down the incense burner and was about to undress him. He said warmly, Thank you for your hard work. I will do the rest myself." The two maids looked at each other. They couldn't hide their regret, but they didn't pester him. They bowed to Jiang Wang and left the room. It wasn't difficult for transcendence to be immaculate. However, the hot spring palace was a special place. They could only go there after burning incense and bathing for 3 consecutive days. This was the rule. Jiang Wang looked at the floating flower petals in the bathtub and felt a little uncomfortable. Only those young masters who were used to applying powder would like to bathe in flower petals. However, he still had to bathe. After taking off his clothes and sitting in the bathtub, he felt comfortable from his limbs and bones. There were many medicinal herbs added to the water, but it didn't have any unpleasant smell. Instead, it had a refreshing fragrance. The gentle and harmless power used the water as a medium to communicate with his body. In a drunken state, Jiang Wang started to think about the fire world. The Qi Emperor had given him a generous reward for obtaining the quota to participate in the Yellow River meeting. Among these rewards, he could choose the secret technique of the imperial court at any time. However, as Han Ling said, it was best to think clearly about what he needed before going to the imperial clan court to choose. It was better to cultivate the fire world and see its effects before deciding what kind of secret technique to choose. There was no need to rush for the artifacts in the Emperor's treasury. He wouldn't need them at the Yellow River meeting. If he chose them now, it would be a waste of effort. After the master's ceremony, Jiang Wang had to face a reality. There was a big gap between him and Yung Genzuan of the Heaven Sanctum now. The Yellow River meeting was a stage where countries competed. Who knew if another Heaven Sanctum would appear? Therefore, his confidence in suppressing the world wasn't enough. Fortunately, he was still far from reaching the limit of the Inner Mansion realm. Today was only the 20th of May. There was still more than a month before the Yellow River meeting. He still had some time to improve himself. Time always passed quickly in cultivation. When Jiang Wang came back to his senses from the world of magic, it was already dawn. The sunlight shone through the window paper and flowed quietly in the water. The streamlined muscles of the man from Qingyang town were faintly visible in the water. With the help of the Taoist magic of fire that he had cast before he was immersed in magic, the water wasn't cold, but the medicinal power in the water had dissipated. Jiang Wang got up and changed into dry new clothes. He asked the servants to take away the bathtub. When he was about to continue his cultivation, Cheng Geng-sheng, who had heard the news, squeezed into the room. When he saw Jiang Wang, he sighed regretfully. "I waited until morning to find you. I didn't expect you to drive out 2 charming beauties. What a waste of a good night. You don't understand romance." He looked at Jiang Wang with disdain. "It's a celebration. Do you understand?" Jiang Wang glanced at 14, who was following behind him silently, and said sincerely, "Of course I don't understand it as well as you do." The wretched smile on Cheng Geng-sheng's face disappeared. He became serious. "Let's cut to the chase. I came to find you early in the morning because I want to talk to you about Shui-ju." Jiang Wang raised his eyebrows. "So fast? Is there a result from Bea?" Chapter 1042. It was no wonder that Jiang Wang was so surprised. Shui-ju was able to walk to the front of the Imperial Ancestral Temple and shoot the Qi Emperor. This was not something that could be done by a simple force. Take the Gateless Hell as an example. The Gateless Hell was now a famous assassin organization in the eastern region. But there was absolutely no king of hell who had the chance to walk to the Qi Emperor. Not to mention assassinating him, they did not even have the chance to get close to the Qi Emperor. They had to have been in the Qi for many years to be able to do this. Once such a force made a move, they would have thought of the beginning and the end. They would not leave any obvious clues that would be caught so quickly. If it were so simple, Shui-ju would have been thrown into prison by the Blue Metal. That's not the case. Cheng Geng-sheng shook his head. Even if there is any progress, the Bea will not leak any information until there is a definite breakthrough. This is a matter that could cost one's life. Jiang Wang was puzzled. "Then what do you want to talk about?" "Let me ask you," Cheng Geng-sheng said with a serious face. "Before today, have you seen Shui-ju?" Where can I see him? Jiang Wang shook his head. I only knew this name when I attended the master's ceremony. Cheng Gongsheng breathed a sigh of relief. If you are sure, then it doesn't matter. Otherwise, I am worried that someone will make an issue out of Cui Ju's last conversation with you. Jiang Wang did not ask why someone would make an issue out of this. Perhaps he had blocked someone's way, or perhaps he was simply jealous. There were too many reasons. He had long realized that in this world, everyone was different, just as he said when he admonished the Qi Emperor. Mixing together, loyalty and treachery will always exist. And if someone really made an issue out of this and found evidence that Cui Ju had met Jiang Wang, they could indeed splash a basin of dirty water on Jiang Wang and say that Cui Ju used his death as a step to elevate Jiang Wang. That was why Cheng Gongsheng asked this question. If Jiang Wang had seen Cui Ju somewhere before, Cheng Gongsheng could deal with it in advance. If they really hadn't seen him before, then with Cheng Gongsheng's methods, it was impossible for anyone to have the chance to slander him. But when it came to Cui Ju, that seemingly meaningless stab before his death, that effort to destroy his body, soul, life, and lifespan, it was hard not to be moved by this scene. At that time, Jiang Wang reacted immediately because he had cut off all thoughts. After the incident, he couldn't help but wonder what kind of reason would make such a person with a bright future in the army go crazy and die. Before Cui Ju died, Jiang Wang said. He said he had no regrets. Cui Ju's words were drowned by him on the spot. Some experts might still be able to hear it, but Cheng Gongsheng was clearly not at that level. Hearing this, he paused for a moment. They couldn't help but discuss. Which force do you think Cui Ju is from? This was indeed the matter that people were most concerned about in Qi. In terms of attention, it was even more important than the Yellow River gathering. It was just that it wasn't convenient to discuss it in public. When Jiang Wang reprimanded the Qi Emperor, he said that Cui Ju's stab wasn't a plot by some people in the country to usurp the throne. That was because there wasn't a single person in Qi who had the strength to change the dynasty. The Jiang royal clan firmly held supreme power. There was no basis for a plot to usurp the throne. This point of view was naturally persuasive. However, if one wanted to trace the source and find out the mastermind behind Cui Ju's actions, it wasn't something that could be done with mere speculation. How would I know? Jiang Wang shook his head. Could it be that he's really from China? Cheng Gongsheng muttered to himself. Cui Ju's roar in the plaza was heard by everyone present. It had probably spread throughout Linzi. That sentence said, Xinwu year 31. Cui Ju assassinated Jiang Shu. The Jiang Shu in this sentence was the name of the current emperor of the Qi. As the emperor who held supreme power in the world, it had been many years since anyone dared to call him by his name. As for Xinwu, it was the era name of the country of China. Since year 388 of the Taoist calendar, the War of Qixia ended with the country of China completely withdrawing from the eastern region. The defeated country of China, which returned to the southern region, changed its era name to Xinwu and continued to this day. Even if Jiang Wang didn't know what Xinwu meant back then, he should have known by now. Perplexed, he asked, but if he's from China, what's the point of such an impossible assassination? A mere inner palace realm cultivator couldn't even pass me. So how could he assassinate the emperor? It doesn't matter which power did it. Since this assassination has no chance of success, it means that their goal isn't to assassinate, Cheng Gongsheng said, but to assassinate the emperor itself. Even with Cheng Gongsheng's intelligence, he couldn't reach the truth in a situation where he had lost all information. However, he quickly drew out a certain range. So, this assassination is just to trigger another war in Qixia? The assassin isn't from China, so the mastermind behind the scenes wants to reap the benefits? Jiang Wang asked. It doesn't matter whether the assassin is from China or not. Cheng Gongsheng suddenly shook his head and said, the important thing is that you may be in trouble. Have you ever thought about why Cui Ju chose to die today? He explained, there are many experts in the army, and the 9 soldiers of Qi are all elites. Because Wang Yiwu was trapped in the death row prison camp, Ju was able to win the opportunity to participate in the Master's ceremony and come to the Imperial Martial Arts competition. And the duel between Yu and Lei Zhanxian made him see clearly that he won't be your opponent and won't be able to get a place to participate in the Gathering of the Yellow River. The Gathering of the Yellow River will only be held depending on the water level. The shortest is 10 years and the longest is 15 years. He won't have another chance. Therefore, this may be his only chance to get close to the Qi Emperor in recent years. It's also the only chance in his life to announce that Ju assassinated the Emperor of Qi at such an important ceremony. Jiang Wang had to admit that Cheng Gengsheng's analysis was very reasonable. It was hard to say whether Ju's accomplices would be hostile to him. After all, without him, Ju could compete with Lei Zhanxian. And once Ju obtained the qualification to go to the Gathering of the Yellow River and performed well there, it would almost be announcing his meteoric rise in the Qi dynasty. It would be very beneficial to their plans. But now, he had to stop before the name Jiang Wang. He could only sacrifice himself and make a sound. I'll try not to leave Linzi during this period, Jiang Wang said. With his relationship with Cheng Gengsheng, there was no need for him to play the hero. Even if he wasn't afraid, he would try to avoid those troubles. Also, Cheng Gengsheng said, before going to the Gathering of the Yellow River, take some time to go to the Imperial Ancestral Temple again and pray to the generals who contributed to the ceremony. Usually, this is the way to go on an expedition. Going to the Gathering of the Yellow River to compete with Qinjiao, even the Qi dynasty gave him the ceremony of a master. Naturally, it could be considered an extremely high-standard expedition. As one of the representatives, Jiang Wang should pray to the generals of Qi. Of course, if Cheng Gengsheng didn't mention this rule, Jiang Wang wouldn't know about it. Do I need to go with those too? Jiang Wang asked. Of course, he was asking about Ji Zhaonan and Yunganzuan. Cheng Gengsheng shook his head. No need. Let's go on our own. Jiang Wang thought for a while. Then I'll go tomorrow. He smiled. I'll go for you. As a top noble family in the Qi dynasty, the first Marquis Baoang naturally had a place in the Imperial Ancestral Temple. Yunganzuan didn't even have to think about it. He was definitely going to worship his ancestors. The descendants of the first Marquis Baoang could naturally go to the Ancestral Temple to worship at any time. However, it was an honor to worship in the name of going on an expedition for the country. Jiang Wang went on behalf of Cheng Gengsheng so that he wouldn't lose this honor. Cheng Gengsheng also smiled. It's okay to go to a few more temples to worship. Remember to worship the first Marquis Baoang. Your sister Fengyao will be very happy. Jiang Wang was speechless. Although this was what he called Li Fengyao in private, he was a little embarrassed when Cheng Xianfat mentioned it. When the army went on an expedition, the main general would go to the Imperial Ancestral Temple to worship. This was a custom. As for which general or famous minister to worship, no one would care. However, whichever general had more incense offerings, it would naturally mean that the general's ability and contributions were more recognized by the generals of the later generations. Therefore, Cheng Gengsheng asked him to worship a few more temples as a small favor. Cheng Gengsheng came and left in a hurry. Yunganzuan had just returned. As the person who suppressed Linzi, he definitely wouldn't accept his status in the family falling. In contrast, Cheng Gengsheng had too many things to deal with. Going to the Imperial Ancestral Temple to worship was a simple matter. As long as he was sincere and respectful, there was nothing much to say. What Jiang Wang cared about the most was Ju. It was hard to say how much trouble Ju's assassination could cause. However, in Jiang Wang's opinion, the current Qi Emperor's rule wouldn't be shaken at all by this assassination. Of course, the power behind Ju might have more unknown motives. However, what puzzled Jiang Wang was Ju's "I have no regrets." Why did he say that to him? Was it just because they were in the middle of a battle? Apart from his daily cultivation homework, he immersed himself in the research of the fire world for an entire day. Similarly, he burned incense and bathed, and then cultivated for an entire night. When the sun rose, he had finally built the framework of the fire world, but it was still far from completion. At this time, he could already throw it into the great illusionary land and use the Tao development platform to deduce it. Although it would consume a lot of energy, it was undoubtedly the simplest. However, Jiang Wang didn't intend to do that. He would slowly deduce this killing technique so that he could have a better grasp of it. Just like the 8 notes incinerating sea that he'd created, he was able to grasp it in advance. If it was a high-grade, A-rank Tao technique deduced from the Tao development platform, perhaps it would be even more perfect, but he could only learn and utilize it step by step. At the very least, he had to wait until his skeleton was solid before he could use the Tao development platform to strengthen his flesh. Jiang Wang wouldn't admit that this choice had a little to do with his lack of energy. Jiang Wang temporarily stopped his cultivation and pushed open the door. Without bringing any attendants, he went to the Imperial Ancestral Temple. It was proper to come to the Imperial Ancestral Temple to offer sacrifices before an expedition. Moreover, Jiang Wang had just been appointed as the Tianjiao of the country in front of the Imperial Ancestral Temple the day before yesterday. Therefore, he wasn't stopped. 2 guards stood in front of the Imperial Ancestral Temple's main entrance, looking straight ahead. Jiang Wang walked over without saying anything. Therefore, he walked into the Imperial Ancestral Temple quietly. This was probably the quietest building group in Linzi. Perhaps only the lonely greenstone palace could compare. All the guards on duty in the inner room were the same as the 2 in front of the main door. They stood like stone statues and didn't even blink when people walked in front of them. However, judging from their auras, they were all experts. Jiang Wang didn't know if there were top-notch experts guarding here, but he wasn't stupid enough to find out. He walked in under the solemn atmosphere. Of course, he couldn't go to the main hall. Jiang Wang walked around and entered the side hall. The Heavenly Worship Hall and the Kingdom Guardian Hall were the 2 side halls with the highest standards in the Imperial Ancestral Temple. One was for the people who established the country, while the other was for the people who restored the country. Of course, the latter was much more popular than the former. After all, before Emperor Wu of Qi's restoration of the country, those families who had contributed to the founding of the country had either rebelled or died. Most of the top families in Qi rose up after Emperor Wu restored the country. The first place that Jiang Wang went to was naturally the shrine of the first-generation Marquis Bao. Today, the Zhonggenjia was the top family in Qi. The position of the first-generation Marquis Bao was also in the Kingdom Guardian Hall, but his position was slightly behind. That was because the Zhonggenjia only rose to prominence during the Emperor Wu dynasty. When the Chongxian family got the title of Marquis Baoang and became a top family, they were a generation later than the Shermanli family. The shrine of the first-generation Marquis Baoang, who established the country and restored the country, was at the front of the Kingdom Guardian Hall. There was Tianyi incense in the shrine. It was said that this incense could bear the will of heaven and make the spirit of the worshipper and the worshipper have a subtle connection. It was hard to tell whether it was true or not, but the price was very high. Its fragrance could also warm the soul. It was only used for worship because it was not auspicious, so it was rarely used for cultivation. Jiang Wang took 3 incense sticks, bowed respectfully, and put them into the incense burner. Judging from the situation in the shrine, Yungenzuan should have been here in advance. Maybe this was the reason why Chenggung Sheng reminded Jiang Wang of this matter the next day. He didn't want Jiang Wang to meet Yungenzuan in private. Looking at the statue of the first-generation Marquis Baoang in the shrine, Jiang Wang couldn't help but think. If the person in the green stone palace hadn't been abolished, or if the Chongxian Buddha portrait hadn't stood with that person in the past. Chongxian Buddha portrait had destroyed several countries. Later, he built the Buddha Portrait Pure Land in the Lost World. He had made great contributions to the human race. No matter what, he should have a place in the sacrificial hall of the Imperial Ancestral Temple. It was not impossible to build another shrine. Jiang Wang didn't think too much. After bowing again, he turned to the shrine of Marquis Baoang. Based on his relationship with the descendants of the Li family, he should indeed come to worship. Back then, the ancestor of the Li family destroyed the city with 10 arrows. That kind of divine power made the descendants think about it and feel infinitely fascinated. That was not an ordinary city. It was a city where the rebel army was heavily stationed. The first generation Marquis Baong established the victory of the war of restoring the country with 10 arrows. And the Li family of Stonegate had been passed down to this day, and their reputation had not declined. After worshipping properly, Jiang Wang was ready to leave. However, outside the shrine of Marquis Baong, he inadvertently glanced and saw another shrine. It was side by side with Marquis Baong's shrine, but it was obviously much more deserted. Naturally, this could only be the shrine of the first-generation Marquis Baong. The hereditary title of the Zhang family of Phoenix Fairy had long been taken away, and it was reduced again and again. Finally, it was forgotten. However, the unfilial descendants couldn't erase the first-generation Marquis Baong's contribution to saving the country. In this imperial ancestral temple, the shrine of the Marquis Baong had never been removed. Of course, there were very few people who came here to worship. After all, since a long time ago, the descendants of the Zhang family couldn't even find a place to stay in Linzi. However, at this time, there seemed to be someone worshipping inside. There was a faint fragrance of the incense of heaven's will. Jiang Wang looked around and didn't see anyone else. There were no guards in the Guardian Hall. It was probably just a matter of time before someone came to sweep. After thinking for a while, he stepped inside. Chapter 1043. Popularity sounded familiar, but it was hard to put into practice, so it was somewhat superficial. But it was real. When the Qi Emperor asked the people, Jiang Wuxia said, "Insufficient popularity, insufficient vitality." With the system of a country, popularity is the source of the official energy. This is the basis of the competition between countries and kidnapping people. The first sentence referred to the influence of popularity on the vitality of heaven and earth. The second sentence referred to the connection between popularity and the system of a country. The ninth return Marquis Ancestral Hall was a place without much popularity. Although it was worshipped in the Guardian Hall, and people often came to clean it, it still seemed deserted. Jiang Wang walked into the Ancestral Hall. It was still morning. Most of the places in Linzi City were already bustling. Only this place was solemn and peaceful. The slightly cold morning light shone from somewhere. A figure with his back facing Jiang Wang was bathed in the morning light. This was a familiar person. Perhaps he heard the footsteps. He slowly turned around and looked at Jiang Wang. Seeing Jiang Wang, he did not seem surprised. He only turned back and inserted the Tiani incense into the incense burner. Then, he completely turned around and faced Jiang Wang. "Long time no see, Jiang Qingyang," he said. The Tiani incense was green, like a curtain that wrapped around the blue sky. It was so faint that it was almost invisible, but there was smoke that faintly rose behind him. The smoke jumped over him and curled in front of the tall statue of the first ninth return Marquis. This was a statue of the same height, about 8 feet tall. Its body was not particularly strong. This statue was half naked with countless scars on its body. It was half naked because there was half a purple robe. Back then, the ninth return Marquis had fought 9 battles 9 times and died of exhaustion. The martial emperor took off his robe and put on his corpse. The statue was like this, probably to commemorate this matter. And to be able to come to the Guardian Hall of the Imperial Ancestral Temple unimpeded and worship the ninth return Marquis here, it was naturally the only bloodline of the Phoenix immortal Zhang family, Zhang Yong. Or rather, it was very likely someone who was not Zhang Yong. Jiang Wang subconsciously thought of Cheng Gongsheng's warning yesterday, "You may be in trouble." Although he was on guard, he didn't show it on his face. It has been a while. After the battle on Mount Yunwu, they hadn't come into contact with each other again. Even if they met by chance, it was just a glance. Back then, he had come out of the Heavenly Palace mystic realm at the same time. His friendship with Su Xiangqian and Li Longchuan had deepened. However, after meeting Zhang Yong a few times, they had become strangers. "Are you here to offer sacrifices to the ancestors of my Zhang clan?" Zhang Yong said softly, You are very considerate." As he spoke, he moved to the side and gave Jiang Wang the position of the priest. Marquis Zhou Gui was naturally a martyr. Jiang Wang had the idea to come in and take a look. Originally, he also wanted to pay his respects. Without saying anything more, he walked to the altar and took out 3 sticks of heaven's incense. He lit them together and bowed respectfully before inserting the incense into the incense burner. He bowed again. Zhang Yong stood to the side and waited for Jiang Wang to finish before asking, "Why can you not be perfunctory at all? You don't know him, and you're not a native of Qi. The current Phoenix Immortal Zhang clan can't possibly bring you any benefits. How can you be so serious?" The current Zhang Yong was different from any other Zhang Yong Jiang Wang had seen before. Before entering the Heavenly Palace mystic realm, Zhang Yong was brave, but also a little childish and timid. After leaving the Heavenly Palace mystic realm, Zhang Yong was reserved and obviously more confident. At that time, Zhang Yong, who followed the 11th Prince Jiang Wuqi on Mount Yunwu, was eager to stand out and achieve merits. His eyes were full of ambition. This was a complete portrait of a person's growth. As for the Zhang Yong, who was in the middle of the overlapping layers of Taoist techniques, he was complicated and mysterious. But no matter which Zhang Yong it was, he wouldn't be so talkative like today. He would take the initiative to speak. "Why aren't you saying anything?" he asked again. "I don't think your question is a question. Do all things in the world have to force a why?" Jiang Wang said, "Marquis 9 Returns is a person worthy of respect, so I respect him. It's that simple. You're very sincere, really, you're very sincere." Zhang Yong looked at Jiang Wang and then turned his head to look at the statue of Marquis 9 Returns. He sighed. "Unfortunately, I can't do it." He used a strange, dreamlike tone to say, "No matter how I convince myself, no matter how I deceive myself, I can't respect anyone in this nation from the bottom of my heart." Jiang Wang calmly took a step back. "So?" Zhang Yong seemed to suddenly regain his wits and comforted. "You don't need to be nervous. We're not enemies. I don't have any personal hatred for you. Besides," he laughed, "I'm not your opponent, am I?" Jiang Wang naturally wouldn't relax his guard because of Zhang Yong's words. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword. "Who in the world are you? If you ask me this question 1,000 times, 10,000 times, I'll only have one answer." He lowered his eyes slightly and said, "I'm the descendant of Marquis 9 Returns, the only surviving bloodline of the Phoenix Immortal Zhang family, Zhang Yong." "It's very strange." Jiang Wang stared at him and said, "Now that I think about it, it's very strange." At that time on Mount Yunwu, I actually chose to remain silent and didn't expose your suspicions. And after so long, I didn't think about it again. Zhang Yong chuckled. "There's nothing strange about it. You're kind-hearted and know how to be considerate and sympathetic. The you on Mount Yunwu just succumbed to your natural instincts. At that time, I was under your eye technique?" Jiang Wang asked. "Jiang Qingyang, that's not important." Zhang Yong said, "What's important is that you're kind-hearted." Jiang Wang thought for a moment and slowly pulled out his long sword. The beautiful body of the sword was even clearer in the morning light. "I think it's just because," he said, "at that time, I didn't plan to settle down in Qi, and I wasn't a blue metal arrester yet." Zhang Yong was still laughing. He smiled and asked Jiang Wang, "Is it your duty? Then what about your compassion?" He asked, "Your kindness, your sympathy, and your compassion?" Jiang Wang looked at him calmly. "My compassion won't be given to assassins, nor will it be given to conspirators." Ever since Mount Yunwu, Zhang Yong always walked around Jiang Wang. If he didn't have to, he would never meet him. The reason why a person like him would expose himself today and no longer hide his words. Jiang Wang could only think of one reason, and that was that he couldn't hide it anymore. Why couldn't he hide it all of a sudden? The only thing Jiang Wang could think of was Cui Zhu's assassination of the emperor. There must be some kind of relationship between this Zhang Yong and Cui Zhu. Sigh. Zhang Yong sighed with a smile. There are too many smart people in this world. If you reveal a single hair, they can dig out 18 generations of your ancestors. He suddenly raised his head and took a step forward. "Come, take me." Chapter 1044. As for battle, Jiang Wang absolutely didn't hesitate. Almost at the same time that Zhang Yong stepped forward, he had already drawn his sword close. Jiang Wang shone with a cold light, drawing out a straight line in front of Zhang Yong. The famed scholar is in dire straits, but he doesn't change his style. 10 years of dire straits, a debt of revenge. This was the famed scholar's downfall sword that Jiang Wang had fused with Chao Yu's 10 years of hidden saber technique. When the sword rose, the cold light was still swirling, but when he approached, the cold light had already disappeared. And that horizontal line had already fallen in front of Zhang Yong. A single line was the difference between life and death. But at this moment, Zhang Yong's eyes suddenly opened wide. Those eyes were as dark as the night. He looked at that horizontal line, with eyes that masked all his emotions, looked at that horizontal line. The night in his eyes quickly passed, and as the night in his eyes passed, the horizontal line that Jiang Wang had slashed out unexpectedly disappeared, as if it had already melted into the night. Jiang Wang's sword wasn't an ordinary one. Even if it couldn't compare to Chao Yu's 10 years of hidden saber technique at its peak, its killing power was still greatly increased, far surpassing the previous sword. If this sword had been used against Lei Zhanqian would have had to use the Lei Shi to resist, and it wouldn't have been easy. Jiang Wang had been holding his sword for a long time. Facing Zhang Yong, who he hadn't interacted with for a while and didn't know the depths of, he directly slashed out with a sword that he had just mastered. Although it couldn't be said to be a sure thing, he still had a certain amount of confidence. But it had been so easily melted. Zhang Yong's ocular technique was simply a world of difference compared to his performance in the battle at Mount Yunwu. But of course, Jiang Wang wouldn't shrink back. His first sword didn't succeed, and it didn't tremble in the slightest. He directly tapped his foot, and in this small space, he shattered the blue clouds. With a leisurely posture, he turned to Zhang Yong's side. He leaned his body forward, and his gaze instantly became sharp. The leisurely feeling faded and transformed into an extremely oppressive posture. The tip of the sword went straight for Zhang Yong's waist. This sword was an old general past his prime, bravely fighting to the death. Zhang Yong also turned her eyes, this time meeting Jiang Wang's eyes. Jiang Wang had tried his best to avoid looking into Zhang Yong's eyes, but Zhang Yong still caught his gaze easily. That's right, this feeling. It was as if his gaze had materialized and was being controlled by Zhang Yong's eyes. Their gazes then connected. It was almost as if Wang Ao had shattered the Blood King's gaze with one punch. Of course, this didn't mean that Zhang Yong was as strong as Wang Ao. After all, Jiang Wang was far from being comparable to the Blood King. Instead, it was because eye techniques were better at controlling one's gaze. At the same time, his eye techniques had indeed reached an unfathomable level. A dark night appeared in front of Jiang Wang's eyes. It was a boundless, deep night. Yu Yuan's fear was spreading infinitely. The sword was still in his hand, and the sword momentum was still gathering, but his opponent was nowhere to be seen. This wasn't Bao Buozhao's lightless divine art. It wasn't like the light had been extinguished and the darkness had descended. Instead, it was a kind of dark night that directly affected the mind. I have eyes, so you don't know. As for Jiang Wang, he stepped forward and calmly walked into the dark night. Immortal state of hearing, open. His gaze walked into the dark night, and the mind affected by his eyes was also in the dark night. But hearing was in reality. 10,000 voices come. I can hear them. In the darkness of the night, only the heartbeats of the two could be heard. The sound was so clear. Only their breathing was calm, but it flowed into his ears. Jiang Wang's expression didn't change. He directly pulled his sword horizontally, and another sword fell. Without storing up the sword, the essence of this sword was naturally inferior to before. But facing Zhang Yong, who might be involved in the assassination of Lord Qi, Jiang Wang had no intention of holding back. Cheng Gongsheng's reminder was still ringing in his ears. He suspected that Zhang Yong had deliberately waited here today to welcome him. The Guardian Palace was solemn and serene. After all, in the Imperial Ancestral Temple, people would let down their guard. But at the same time, it wasn't an imperial shrine, so there wouldn't be any experts watching. Come to think of it, it was really a very suitable place. He had ruined Cui Ju's plan, forcing Cui Ju to assassinate him. The power behind Cui Ju couldn't help but resent him. Then it wasn't impossible to find an opportunity to assassinate him. So this time, Chang Xiangxi's sword was wrapped with a wisp of frosty Buzhou wind. The sword rose on the line of life and death, and the Buzhou wind blew away 10,000 lives. Jiang Wang's sword was already a fatal blow, but it didn't stop there. In the second inner palace, there was also a flash of black and white light. Since there were only two people facing each other, let's see my life and death stray. Judging from the blood flow, the collision of muscles, and the surge of Tao essence, Zhang Yong had a total of 7 choices at this time, and the stray path set a left turn for him. Jiang Wang's sword style didn't change, and he still used his status to suppress his opponent. But the Buzhou wind left the sword and quietly turned into a killing nail, directly piercing to the right. It should be over. In a battle of this level, one wrong step would be the difference between life and death. Judging from the sound of the immortal state of hearing, the opponent was moving forward. The stray path had lost its effect. This terrifying thought appeared in Jiang Wang's mind. This was something that was enough to make many cultivators lose their minds on the spot. The stray path that they relied on actually didn't have any effect when it should have been effective. But this didn't affect Jiang Wang's battle. He believed in the stray path, but he believed in himself even more. Almost instinctively, he pulled back the sword light and stabbed forward with a young and frivolous move. This was the most ostentatious and arrogant move among all the sword styles of the human Tao. At this time, Jiang Wang's courage was displayed the most. If one wasn't frivolous, it would be a waste of youth. Pooh! The sound of a long sword piercing through flesh. What surprised Jiang Wang more than any result was Zhang Yong, who had displayed powerful combat strength, terrifying eye techniques, and was even unaffected by the stray path today. His sword actually pierced directly into his heart. Amidst Zhang Yong's labored breathing, the night dissipated. Jiang Wang faced him head-on, looking at Zhang Yong's instantly pale face. Jiang Wang had a realization in his heart. Zhang Yong had already made up his mind that he would die here today. It wasn't that he knew Jiang Wang's divine ability in advance, nor was it that he could ignore the influence of the stray path. At that moment, his physical body did have a choice. As an expert, he instinctively made many choices in battle. But in his heart, there's only one choice. He only wanted to die. He only wanted to die. That was why the stray path was ineffective. But why? Didn't he come here to ambush him as Cui Ju's accomplice? Why did he take the initiative to die under his sword? Jiang Wang had many doubts in his heart, and Zhang Yong's body suddenly began to disintegrate. Just like Cui Ju the day before yesterday, a huge warning sign arose. Jiang Wang directly drew his long sword, shattered the Qingyun mark, and retreated quickly. Almost in one step, he retreated to the entrance of the spiritual temple. However, Zhang Yong, who had already begun to disintegrate his body and soul, didn't chase after him. He just spat out blood and laughed with difficulty. He didn't seem to be as determined as Cui Ju, so the speed of his disintegration wasn't fast. His hand began to disintegrate from the fingertips, and he looked at his disappearing hand with a sad look in his eyes. Jiang Wang had already decided to withdraw from the Guardian Palace and go to the Imperial Temple to get reinforcements. But somehow he slowed down his footsteps. "Look, you are kind." Zhang Yong raised his eyes and looked at Jiang Wang, who had retreated to the door, and smiled inexplicably. "You still have compassion for me. I don't quite understand." Jiang Wang was puzzled at this time. If Zhang Yong came to the Guardian Palace today to take revenge on him on behalf of the force behind Cui Ju, why didn't he make a move in this state? This should be his strongest state and also his last chance. He asked, Why are you doing this? Why? Zhang Yong whispered, yes, why? His expression was so melancholic. Jiang Wang clearly didn't know his true identity, his story, or what he wanted to do. But he didn't know why. He was actually sad. In February, we had a great result. I also owe a huge debt, but we have come all the way here with so much difficulty. How can we stop? This is not the end. So in March, I will continue to ask for votes. I will continue to work hard because of the lesson last month, and because I am indeed not strong enough and still owe more than 100 chapters to update. I will adjust the monthly votes and update rules. This month, we will base at 5,000 votes. For every 1,000 votes, we will update a chapter. Come on, brothers and sisters. Let's work hard together. In February, we have already called the world Shuanghua. In March, please let the world know my name. I beg for monthly votes. Chapter 1045. Zhang Yong then looked at Jiang Wang, using his sorrowful eyes to look at Jiang Wang. Maybe I should kill you while I'm in my annihilation state. Right now, that might be the best choice, but I don't want to kill you. He then laughed sorrowfully. Maybe I can't kill you either. Just now, my eyes told me that you have a terrifying divine ability. At this moment, his eyes looked very ordinary. There was nothing special about them. However, Jiang Wang had already seen his eye technique and knew how terrifying it was. The night that took away everything. The night that took away the famous scholar's sword. So, you with Cui Ju? Jiang Wang said. At this moment, the same state of disintegration was enough to explain everything. Cui Ju, Zhang Yong muttered, looking at Jiang Wang. Jiang Wang, you're also from small country. You should know what I mean. You asked me why. You asked why. He asked, we're sons, daughters, fathers, and mothers. Why do we have to die in the mountains, in the fields, and on the roadside? Why do our citizens have to live in fear of vicious beasts at all times? Why can the people of Qi be so happy? And why can ordinary people go hiking in the countryside? Why can't our soldiers protect the resources we deserve even though they're bathed in blood? Why can't we give up so much, but most of our gains are taken away by powerful countries? Why can't we see any hope no matter how hard we work, no matter what we do, no matter how much we sacrifice? Why can't we see any hope or future? Jiang Wang suddenly thought of the Yang country. He thought of the white-haired old general Ji Cheng. How many deaths had the old general seen? The entire Ji clan, from men to women, from young to old, had died in battle, but they still couldn't save their country from its fate of destruction. He thought of Tri Mountain City. He thought of the people who died on Alioth Peak, and Doi Wei who cut off her own path of cultivation, opened 5 palaces, and had the ability to move mountains, but still couldn't do anything to that mountain. Of course, he also remembered the old demon he saw in the pine forest beast nest outside Songtao City of the Sioux country. Wild beasts were transformed into vicious beasts, and vicious beasts were nurtured into a foundation after bloodthirstiness. After that, he would use living demons as raw materials to turn them into demon beasts and harvest meridian unlocking pills. The base color of the meridian unlocking elixir was blood. The stronger countries captured demons and distributed them to the smaller countries. Small countries built beast nests, refined meridian unlocking pills, and offered them to strong countries. Through this system, the strong countries firmly controlled the growth of the small countries. Jiang Wang knew about this. Jiang Wang had witnessed everything with his own eyes. Including empathy, pity, and familiarity. Therefore, Zhang Yong was like him, a person who had lost his home, a guest who had lost his home. Now, with Zhang Yong's death, the effect of eye techniques had disappeared. So Jiang Wang was able to think about some things more clearly. Today, Zhang Yong was here, indeed, not to wait for him. He just happened to come at the right time. Then why did Zhang Yong come here? Was it purely because he had occupied the identity of Zhang Yong, so he came to pay respects to the ancestors? No. Jiang Wang suddenly smelled a faint smell of blood. Zhang Yong had died from the collapse of his flesh, blood, and soul. there shouldn't be the smell of blood. No, the smell of blood had always been there, but it had been covered up by Zhang Yang's eye technique before. Jiang Wang suddenly raised his head and looked at the statue of Lord Nine Returns. And Ma Xiong, who was better at handling cases and investigating, had already stepped forward and pulled off the purple robe on Lord Nine Returns' body. So everyone who entered the ancestral temple saw what Zhang Yong had left behind before he died. It was an accusation written on the statue of Lord Nine Returns with blood as ink. It was a poem that had left a deep impression on Jiang Wang. The words written in blood, lingering on the rich and powerful even in death, sacrificing himself to the country without a famous general. The world praises Sherman Li, who knows Feng Xianzhang. That was a poem written by the great scholar of Green Cliff Academy, Emoya. That great scholar had a personality that abhorred evil. He would scold whoever he wanted and never showed mercy. The first time Jiang Wang heard it, it was when Su Xiang stood up for Zhang Yong and read it to mock Gao Jing of the Gao family of Jinghai. Speaking of which, although this poem was merciless, it wasn't a big deal. Emoya himself didn't need to make a living in Qi, and the Qi Emperor wouldn't send people to kill Emoya just because of this poem. There were many arrogant people in the world, and the world was so vast, there would be an end to power. Even if a farmer in the countryside of Chu didn't dare to offend the local ruffians, he still dared to scold the Qin Emperor for 3 days and 3 nights. So a satirical poem wasn't a big deal. The only thing was, this poem was written in blood on the statue of Lord Nine Returns. And the person who wrote this poem was the last descendant of Lord Nine Returns. Chapter 1046. Jiang Wang knew that the Zhang Yong, who had just died, was not a descendant of the Phoenix Fairy Zhang family. The blue plate of the city's inspection office had enough means to prove that this Zhang Yong was not the same Zhang Yong as he knew it. He did not need any clues to prove that this Zhang Yong was not the real Zhang Yong. But who would believe it? Before today, Zhang Yong was still the only surviving bloodline of the Phoenix Immortal Zhang clan. He had obtained an opportunity in the Heavenly Palace secret realm and followed the prince of Great Qi, Jiang Wuqi. He worked diligently, wanting to restore the glory of his ancestors. After today, and it was precisely after doing such a thing, the city's inspection office suddenly announced that he wasn't the real Zhang Yong. No matter how good the evidence was, it was hard to convince people. Therefore, the person who died in the Nine Return Temple was still Zhang Yong regardless of whether he was the real Zhang Yong or not. Before he died, he left a blood letter on the statue of the Nine Return Temple. He used the identity of Zhang Yong to cry to the ancestors of the Zhang family. This was the blood and tears of the descendants of the country's meritorious officials against the Qi court. Who is this, the heavens? This was obviously related to Cui Ju's assassination of the Qi Emperor. First, there was the Xia assassin who assassinated the Qi Emperor at the master ceremony under the cover of Qi's forces. Later, there was the descendant of a meritorious official who died in the temple. After scolding the Qi Emperor for mistreating meritorious officials, he was addicted to women and rewarded the Gao family. If one only looked at these two things, it was like the Qi Emperor had lost his virtue, the Qi court's rule was unstable, and the domestic situation was unstable. If it was not handled well, people's hearts were different. When he saw the contents of the blood letter, the rank 4 blue metal Constable Ma Xiong's expression changed drastically. He immediately covered the statue with the purple robe and turned around. No one is allowed to come in. Lock the National Guard Hall and don't let anyone in. This scene should indeed be blocked, but there was no point in doing so. Jiang Wang looked around silently. The blue metal constables who had rushed in and the guards of the Imperial Ancestral Temple were still gathering. They came in and quickly left. Today's scene would definitely spread. Even if these people kept their mouths shut, the power behind Cui Ju and Zhang Yong would definitely spread the news of what happened in the Ninth Return Temple to the world. He would not let such a tragic death of Zhang Yong become meaningless. It was just that Jiang Wang, who happened to be there at the same time, would inevitably be a little troublesome. The other blue metal bailiffs left, but it was not convenient for him to leave. As the last person who communicated with Zhang Yong before his death, many people wanted to know what Jiang Wang had heard and seen. Of course, this included Ma Xiong. He glanced at the statue covered by the purple robe with lingering fear, as if he was looking at some prehistoric beast. His years of experience in handling cases allowed him to quickly suppress his emotions. He vigilantly glanced at the censer, the altar, and the entire temple. After confirming that there were no other clues for the time being, he looked at Jiang Wang. "Why is Constable Jiang here?" he asked. Although they had interacted before, they got along pretty well. But at this moment, Ma Xiong clearly wanted to do things by the book, and he had to. But at this moment, Jiang Wang suddenly thought of another problem. Cui Ju's assassination of the emperor and Zhang Yong's crying temple. The power behind the scenes had made 2 moves in a row, both trying to break the rule of the Qi emperor. This move was enough to set off monstrous waves, and it indeed shocked him on the spot. But in fact, there was a very important question. That was, why did Ma Xiong appear here with people? The answer was obvious. He had followed Zhang Yong here. The most important task of the entire city inspection office was to investigate the case of Cui Ju's assassination of the emperor. Cui Ju was on the list of candidates for the Yellow River meeting. From the political affairs hall to the lightning prison army, there were too many places to investigate. Countless blue metal bailiffs had been working nonstop these 2 days on the case. And now, it was obvious that they had found some connection between Zhang Yong and Cui Ju through Ma Xiong. They even had some evidence. Otherwise, he would not have brought people directly into the Imperial Ancestral Temple. This could also explain why Zhang Yong no longer hid in front of Jiang Wang, because he could not hide anymore. Just as he said, if he revealed even a single strand of hair, he would be caught by others. However, the other important aspect of this problem was that Zhang Yong was previously a subordinate of the Longevity Palace Master, Jiang Wuqi. Cui Ju could be on the list of candidates for the Yellow River meeting because Zhang Yong had used the power of the Longevity Palace to help him. In this way, the fire of Cui Ju's assassination of the emperor. It was actually the first to burn Jiang Wuqi. This was the 11th prince of the Qi, who was called the most similar to the current emperor, and was indeed especially favored by the Qi emperor. Jiang Wuqi was one of the most promising candidates for the throne. He had a certain foundation in the Qi political circle, and the power of the Longevity Palace was not inferior to any of the princes and princesses. Once he was involved in the case of Cui Ju's assassination of the emperor, what would happen next was simply unimaginable. This was a terrifying storm. No one knew how many people would die and how many families would perish. Jiang Wang composed himself and replied, "Before the Yellow River meeting, I specially came to the Imperial Ancestral Temple to worship, hoping to inherit the heroic spirit of the Qi's martyrs." This was indeed the truth, and there was nothing to hide. Ma Xiong asked again, "You came to worship at the 9th Return Marquis Shrine?" Jiang Wang said truthfully, "I first went to the shrine of the first Marquis of Baoang, and then to the shrine of the first Marquis of Guicheng before coming here. After all, the first Marquis of 9 Return and the first Marquis of Guicheng were heroes." "You made an appointment with the person who just died to worship here?" Ma Xiong asked. In this kind of semi-public occasion, he refused to refer to him as Zhang Yong. From now on, he would not recognize this person's identity. Although he was a 4th-class blue metal who had climbed up step by step from the bottom, he was very clear that they had no choice but to recognize Zhang Yong's identity. But the attitude of the Capital Inspection Office had to be shown. Of course, Jiang Wang also recognized it, because he was now also in the blue metal system. So he did not mention the 2 words, Zhang Yong. He only shook his head and said, "We did not have any contact beforehand. After the martial arts competition in front of the palace, I did not step out of the Shashan villa. It was a sudden idea that I came here today to worship. This is all verifiable. You were the only one present when he died. What happened to you before we arrived?" Ma Xiong flashed the image recording stone in his hand. "Your explanation to me now will be completely recorded. Don't worry about me deliberately distorting it. Jiang Wang shook his head. I also have a blue medal at my waist. I should help the Bea restore the truth. But he glanced at Ma Xiong. Shouldn't we discuss this matter in detail in front of the adults? After all, there's only you and me here. His meaning was very clear. I'm also a fourth-class blue medal constable. We are of the same rank, and I have not committed any crime. It is not appropriate for you to interrogate me alone. It was not that he suspected Ma Xiong of anything, but at this sensitive time, he had to be cautious. The two major events of Cui Zhu assassinating the monarch and Zhang Yong weeping at the temple had already demonstrated the strength of the power behind the scenes. Ma Xiong's pursuit of Zhang Yong to this point did not seem to be a problem, and in their previous contact, his performance was also very normal. But who knew? Cui Zhu was able to participate in the ceremony of the Great Master, which was much cleaner and more innocent. As for whether the image recording stone was reliable, it was just a matter of listening. Even the great oath of the heart demon was not reliable. How could he count on a dead object? I'm a day behind, but the extension scheduled for February has finally been paid. I will work harder in March, so I beg for monthly votes. Chapter 1047. Ma Xiong stared at Jiang Wang for a while. He put away the photo stone and asked, "Do you want to go to the inspector's office?" There was nothing wrong with his attitude. Logically speaking, there was no need for him to be hostile to Jiang Wang, the Tianjiao of the country, unless he was eager to make a contribution, or he had other plans. Jiang Wang said, "Of course, I will definitely cooperate." Ma Xiong searched the Guardian Hall for a while and left 4 blue metal detectives here to prevent anyone from entering or leaving. Then he left with Jiang Wang. It was not accurate to say that he was escorting Jiang Wang, but Ma Xiong's eyes did not leave Jiang Wang. Jiang Wang's expression was as usual. As a blue metal detective, Ma Xiong was investigating this case. It was his duty to supervise him, so there was no conflict. When he came out of the Imperial Ancestral Temple and saw the sun climbing above his head, he suddenly felt a sense of confusion. It was the second day after the master's ceremony. He thought it was just a simple ceremony, but he didn't expect to see such a big event with his own eyes. The politics of Qi was treacherous. He couldn't help but think about whether his decision to bring in over after the Yellow River meeting was correct. The Yun Nation was a neutral country with no hostile forces nearby. The Lingxiao cabinet was supreme in the Yun Nation. As the only daughter of the Lingxiao cabinet, Yi Qingyu had the ability to protect Anin, especially Yi Lingxiao, who was very fond of Anin. On the other hand, even if he did well in the Yellow River meeting, could he really rest easy after establishing a foundation in Qi? Living in a powerful empire like Qi was peaceful and peaceful most of the time. But once something happened, the danger was often unavoidable. He hoped that these things would settle down as soon as possible. The rise and fall of the people were suffering. Just a few steps away from the Imperial Ancestral Temple, another team of blue metal detectives hurried over. The leader had high cheekbones and bright eyes. It must be Ma Xiong who informed him. This person was very agile. He went straight into the Imperial Ancestral Temple without saying anything. Ma Xiong obviously had no objections. He took 10 blue metal detectives with him and walked around Jiang Wang. Lordly, he casually explained to Jiang Wang, perhaps to ease the atmosphere or to observe their reactions. He opened his fingers and pointed at his eyes. I could see a lot of things. Unlike Jiang Wang, who suddenly became a blue metal arrester, Ma Xiong was a disciple of the school of legalism. He had the cultivation level of a 4-star foreign tower and was an experienced 4-star blue metal arrester. The person he called Sir was at least a 4-star blue metal arrester, who was at the same level as Arrester Yulong before he retired. At this moment, Jiang Wang was thinking that if he could learn a powerful eye technique, would he be able to trigger some inspiration and help him deduce the celestial eye technique? Even if it was completely inappropriate, it could still be considered a supplement to the immortal state of sound and provide more insight. Previously, he had been hesitating in many directions, but now he suddenly thought it through. He decided to prioritize ocular sorcery over the secret skill of the imperial court that Emperor Qi had bestowed upon him. As for whether Lord Li, whom Ma Xiong had mentioned, could find any clues in the Ninth Return Spirit Temple, he was not optimistic. The process of Cui Ju and Zhang Yang's disintegration was completely irreversible, and everything disintegrated cleanly. Cui Ju died in front of Emperor Qi and did not leave any clues. At the time, there were probably many people with better eyes than Lord Li. What was the result? So there was nothing to hope for. The patrol office of the capital city occupied a large area in the North City. From the area that the office occupied, one could get a glimpse of its power. It was no wonder that Zhang Shi suppressed his realm and was unwilling to descend. Of course, this was not a problem, and no one would criticize him for being unwilling to go. Almost all the patrol captains were like this. As long as they did not lose the Emperor's trust and were asked to step down, they would usually delay until it would affect their future. Then, they would choose to break through the realm and be unwillingly promoted. The interrogation was carried out in a brightly lit room. Jiang Wang was not a criminal, so it could not be considered an interrogation. For the time being, it could be called an interrogation. Other than Ma Xiong, there was also a deputy patrol inspector with the surname Yang. This deputy patrol inspector was not like Lin Yuxi, who borrowed his position temporarily. He was one of the deputy patrol inspectors who actually handled the affairs of the patrol office on a daily basis. He had a lot of power in the patrol office of the capital city. The deputy patrol inspector with the surname Yang and Ma Xiong sat, facing Jiang Wang on either side of a long table. The table was painted iron black, and the surface was very smooth. The interrogation was led by Ma Xiong, who had personally gone to the scene. He placed a photographic stone on the table to show that there was no interference. Constable Jiang, please truthfully describe everything you saw and experienced at the Temple of the Ninth Return Marquis. Patrol Inspector Yang, and I will witness your testimony. Jiang Wang said, I also need a photographic stone to record. Ma Xiong and the deputy patrol inspector with the surname Yang looked at each other. He was probably in a difficult position, but the deputy patrol inspector with the surname Yang was unexpectedly easy to talk to. No problem. Not only did he directly take out a photographic stone and give it to Jiang Wang, he also said, you can check it. If you are worried, you can change it. Jiang Wang said apologetically, sorry to trouble you. Although he said it was troublesome, he still checked what should be checked. Some unimportant things could be ignored. But when it concerned his own safety, he could not let go of what should be cared about. Holding the photographic stone in his hand, Jiang Wang poured his Tao energy into it. Then he said, when I went to the Imperial Ancestral Temple to worship, I first went to the Temple of the Marquis of Baoang, then to the Temple of the Marquis of City Crusher. After coming out of the Temple of the Marquis of City Crusher, I went to the Temple of the Ninth Return Marquis of Baoang. Then I saw that person, the person who acted under the name of Zhang Yang. If we talk in private, you can just say Zhang Yang. It doesn't matter. Ma Xiong added. Then he asked, do you know him? This was a small questioning technique. If Jiang Wang had to be careful not to say that Zhang Yang was Zhang Yang, it meant that he had to remind himself at all times. Thus, he had to be on high alert during the entire process of answering. As the investigator, Ma Xiong certainly hoped that he would relax a little. Then, he could inadvertently reveal something. I know him. Jiang Wang did not care. He said directly, we are all the victors of the previous Heavenly Palace mystic realm. Other than us, there are also Wang Yiwu, Cheng Gengsheng, Li Longchuan, and Su Xiangqian. In addition, when I went to the Yangland earlier, I visited Zhang Yong in Fengxian County. That time, something happened to his family. He looked very haggard and was relatively cold. Therefore, we did not communicate further. Later on, in Yunwu Mountain, we fought once. I won't say the details. You should be able to find out easily. Since then, we did not communicate again. We just happened to meet today. The deputy patrol inspector, surnamed Yang, said with a smile. Constable Jiang must have won that fight. Jiang Wang smiled faintly and said, of course. Although this person had clearly shown goodwill, He did not take the opportunity to strike up a conversation. Instead, he continued to describe. This is kind of calmness. When I entered the temple, Zhang Yong was worshipping in front of the altar. I also went to burn an incense stick. Then, knock, knock, knock. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. Chapter 1048. Ma Xiong's position in the patrol office was obviously lower than Deputy Patrol Inspector Yang, so he took the initiative to get up and walk out of the room. The room where the interrogation was taking place naturally couldn't just let anyone in. Let her in. It was unknown what was said outside, but Ma Xiong said helplessly and then walked in himself. He exchanged glances with the Deputy Patrol Inspector, surnamed Yang. Apparently, they were communicating via voice transmission. The Deputy Patrol Inspector, surnamed Yang, also nodded slightly. After a while, the Cheese Huaying Palace Master came in. Her figure that was taller than the average man stepped into the room and naturally attracted everyone's attention. Your Highness, Deputy Patrol Inspector Yang said, please forgive me for not being able to salute you due to official business. Jiang Wuyo raised her hand. No need to be so polite. This isn't an interrogation, right? If it is, I'll leave. Of course not. Constable Jiang is not a criminal. Deputy Patrol Inspector Yang said. It's just a normal interrogation. That's good. Jiang Wuyo smiled. I'll listen. After saying this, he didn't pay any attention to the reactions of Deputy Patrol Inspector Yang and Ma Xiong. He just looked around and casually took a chair and sat down on the side. From beginning to end, she didn't communicate with Jiang Wang, but everyone knew why she had come. Jiang Wang wasn't surprised. The green-plate arrester of the inspector's office in the capital city had openly pursued Jiang Wuqi's subordinates. If Jiang Wuyo still couldn't get the news, then Huaying Palace would have no chance to compete for the position of crown prince. So it wasn't surprising that she knew that Jiang Wang was brought back to the patrol office by Ma Xiong and quickly came. Ma Xiong coughed and was about to continue asking. Knock, knock, knock. There was another knock on the door. Naturally, he couldn't let Patrol Inspector Yang go and see the situation, let alone Huaying Palace Master. Ma Xiong sighed in his heart, got up again, and went out. When he returned, there was already a fat figure following behind him. Cheng Gung Sheng smiled. I didn't disturb everyone, did I? Of course not. Patrol Inspector Yang smiled and said, Mr. Chong Xian, please feel free to take a seat. We can talk to Constable Jiang. Chong Xian Fat didn't stand on ceremony, but after looking around at the empty chairs in the room, he smiled and said, It's all right. I'm tired from sitting in the sedan chair just now. I'll stand for a while. It was understandable that Jiang Wuyo had come. Other than protecting Jiang Wang, he was probably also concerned about how much Jiang Wuqi was involved in this matter and wanted to get first-hand information. As for Cheng Gung Sheng, he must have sensed some sort of danger. In fact, as soon as he heard the news that Jiang Wang had been brought to the inspection office, he immediately rushed over. At this time, Jiang Wang and the two questioners were sitting opposite each other across a long black table. Jiang Wuyo sat on the left side of the long black table with a calm expression. Cheng Gung Sheng stood on the right side of the long black table, smiling as he looked at Ma Xiong. Ma Xiong couldn't help but look back at him. Cheng Gung Sheng raised his hand and said with a smile, Please continue. We won't disturb you. You can ask whatever you want. Just ask whatever you want. Ma Xiong looked helpless. One of you is a palace master, and the other is the legitimate son of a noble family. You two are staring at me like two guardians. How do I ask? He swallowed and made a last effort to whisper, This matter has a great impact. Even His Majesty is paying attention. Jiang Wuyo interrupted him and said, If it's not convenient for me to listen, you can leave now. Ma Xiong certainly couldn't say that it was inconvenient for the Huaying Palace Master to listen, unless Jiang Wang was indeed suspected of being an accomplice or was detained here for interrogation as a criminal. Now, Jiang Wang was just a bystander of that incident. The reason he came here was to help them restore the scene at that time. He had a position and a noble title, and he would soon replace Qi to fight in the Battle of the Yellow River. Before there was evidence, Ma Xiong didn't even dare to use the word suspect on him. He recalled that when they were in Beijing, Zhang Wang had to report to him before he left, and now, Ma Xiong couldn't help but sigh in his heart. There were new people in every generation, and the heroes were old. He quickly adjusted his posture and suppressed the thought of doing a meritorious deed in his heart. He said seriously, "Constable Jiang, please continue." Jiang Wang's attitude was the same from beginning to end. He wasn't timid because he was alone, and he wasn't arrogant because of the support of the Huaying Palace Master and Chenggang Sheng. He still spoke gently and calmly. "After I worshipped Lord Jiuge," Zhang Yong suddenly said. Zhang Yong suddenly said to me, "Why are you worshipping him so seriously? You don't know him, and the current Fengxian Zhang family can't bring you any benefits." Then he said that he couldn't do it, that he couldn't respect anyone in Qi. I realized that he wasn't the original Zhang Yong, and as a blue metal, I was ready to capture him. After exchanging a few blows, he entered a state where his flesh, blood, soul, life, and everything else disintegrated. I retreated to the entrance of the spirit temple, and then Constable Ma arrived. Ma Xiong thought for a moment and asked, "The same state as Cui Zhu?" "Yes, exactly the same." Zhang Wang said. Zhang Yong called that state annihilation. "Then how did you escape?" Ma Xiong couldn't help but ask. "I heard that that state is very terrifying and lethal." Zhang Wang said indifferently, "Because I'm very strong." Ma Xiong, the Huaying Palace Master, seemed to be bored. "Constable Ma, do you still have any doubts about this?" No." Ma Xiong paused, "But I still have some questions." At this moment, the door was pushed open. The patrol commandant and patrol inspector of the capital, Zheng Shi, walked in. He stood at the door and said indifferently, "I'll ask you some questions. You can leave first." Ma Xiong and Deputy Patrol Inspector Yang didn't say anything and left the room. They didn't have any objections to why the Huaying Palace Master and Chenggang Sheng were still present. In Beia, Zheng Shi was a man of his word. Zheng Shi closed the door, walked a few steps, and sat in Deputy Patrol Inspector Yang's seat. Jiang Wuyo didn't move, but his expression was obviously more serious. Chenggang Sheng's smile also disappeared. The commandant of Beia, Zheng Shi, was a person with real power in Linzi. Now, he was in charge of Cui Zhu's assassination case and was temporarily given great power. He could even mobilize the night watchman at will. It was an organization that suppressed all evil in Qi. After Zheng Shi sat down, he looked at Jiang Wang for a while. Seeing this, Jiang Wang himself felt a little uneasy, wondering if he had exposed some problem that he didn't know about. Is that Zhang Yong really related to me? I already know Cui Zhu. But Zheng Shi only asked, "Have you eaten?" Jiang Wang paused for a moment, then said, I had some snacks in the morning, then went to the Imperial Ancestral Temple." Zheng Shi nodded and asked, "How did you sleep these 2 days?" "I didn't sleep. I was cultivating." Jiang Wang said honestly, "Diligence is a good thing, but don't be too tense. Sometimes you have to relax." Zheng Shi said softly. Jiang Wang nodded obediently. "Okay, I know. Okay, I'm done." Zheng Shi stood up. "Go back and prepare for the Battle of the Yellow River." Jiang Wang paused for a moment again. However, Zheng Shi only smiled and walked out of the room without saying anything else. Indeed, there was no need to say anything. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.